The afternoon sun blazed over Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, turning the Pacific Ocean into a sheet of hammered silver. Heat shimmered off the tarmac where a plain gray sedan rolled to a stop near the main administration building. The driver, a young corporal with precisely 2 weeks on base, glanced in the rearview mirror at his passenger. She wore civilian clothes, dark jeans, a simple white button-down shirt, and aviator sunglasses that hid her eyes. No uniform, no rank insignia, nothing that screamed military, except the way she sat, spine straight, shoulders squared, hands folded calmly in her lap. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. And when she thanked him for the ride, her voice carried a quiet authority that made him sit up straighter without understanding why. "Ma'am, do you need help finding your way to the visitor's office?" he asked as she stepped out, pulling a small black duffel from the trunk. "I'll manage, Corporal. Thank you." She walked toward the Dacian building with measured steps, her eyes taking in everything. The way the flags moved in the breeze, the position of security cameras, the worn path in the grass where personnel cut corners instead of following the sidewalk. Small details that most people never noticed, but she cataloged them all with the instinct of someone who had spent decades reading environments for threats and opportunities. Commander Elena Voss, though no one on this base knew that name yet, had arrived exactly as planned. Unannounced, unrecognized, invisible. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Inside the administration building, the air conditioning hit like a cold wall. Elena removed her sunglasses, her brown eyes adjusting to the fluorescent lighting as she moved down the corridor. Voices drifted from an open door, the base operations center, where duty officers monitored communications and coordinated daily activities. She paused at the threshold, observing. 3 officers sat at workstations, their attention divided between computer screens and a conversation about weekend liberty plans. A master chief stood near a large tactical display, arms crossed, studying a training schedule with the kind of intensity that suggested he actually cared about his job. The room hummed with the background noise of military efficiency, radio chatter, keyboard clicks, the soft whir of cooling fans. No one looked up when she entered. Elena found an empty desk in the corner and set down her duffel. She pulled out a thin folder marked with red classification stripes and began reading. Her expression neutral, her posture relaxed. To anyone glancing her way, she looked like another contractor or civilian liaison, someone temporary, someone unimportant, someone to ignore. The Master Chief noticed her first. He turned from the tactical display, his weathered face creasing into a polite but cautious expression. "Can I help you find someone, ma'am?" "I'm exactly where I need to be, Master Chief," Elena replied without looking up from her folder. "Thank you." He hesitated, clearly wanting to ask more questions but not quite sure if he had the authority. After a moment, he nodded and returned to his work, though his eyes flicked back to her every few minutes with growing curiosity. Elena allowed herself the ghost of a smile. She had perfected this approach over the years, arriving quietly, blending in, observing before revealing herself. It told her more about a command in an hour than any formal inspection could reveal in a week. She saw how people behaved when they thought no one important was watching. She saw where discipline was tight and where it had grown slack. She saw who actually worked and who just looked busy. And right now, what she saw concerned her. The duty officers were competent enough, but their attention was scattered. The training schedule on the display had gaps that shouldn't exist, and the radio chatter she was monitoring revealed response times that were slower than protocol required. Nothing catastrophic, but enough small inefficiencies that suggested systemic issues. She made a mental note and continued reading. 20 minutes later, The door burst open with the kind of energy that announced someone's arrival before they even spoke. "Master Chief, tell me you've got the dive schedule updated because I've got 12 SEALs who are about to mutiny if they don't get their certification dives done by Friday." The voice belonged to a man in his mid-30s. Built like someone who treated their body as a tool for war. His uniform was crisp, his movements economical, his confidence absolute. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Kane, though Elena didn't know his name yet, had the bearing of someone who had earned respect through competence and wasn't afraid to demand it. He stopped mid-stride when he noticed Elena sitting in the corner. "Who's the new contractor?" he asked the Master Chief, not bothering to lower his voice. "Not sure, sir. She said she's where she needs to be." Marcus turned his full attention to Elena, his eyes sweeping over her with the automatic assessment every SEAL learned. Evaluating threat level, physical capability, potential role. She met his gaze calmly, her expression unchanged, and something about her stillness made him pause. Most civilians looked away when a SEAL stared at them. Most junior officers fidgeted or tried to explain themselves. This woman did neither. She simply looked back at him with eyes that had clearly seen things, though what things, he couldn't quite determine. "You lost?" Marcus asked, his tone friendly but probing. "No," Elena replied simply. "You here for someone?" "I'm here for everyone." The cryptic answer earned her a raised eyebrow. Marcus crossed his arms, his curiosity now fully engaged. "That's either profound or deliberately vague." "I'm going with vague." Elena closed her folder and stood, and Marcus noted with some surprise that she moved with the kind of fluid grace that came from years of physical training. Not like a contractor. Not like admin staff. Like someone who understood their body as a weapon. "Commander Kane," the Master Chief interrupted, saving Elena from having to respond. "The dive schedule's updated. Your team's cleared for certification dives Thursday and Friday, weather permitting." Marcus nodded but didn't take his eyes off Elena. "You military or civilian?" "Does it matter?" she asked. "If you're sitting in my operations center reading classified material." "Yeah, it matters." "Fair point." Elena considered how much to reveal. Part of her evaluation process involved seeing how personnel reacted to ambiguity, to authority that didn't announce itself with rank pins and ribbons. But she also recognized that Marcus Kane wasn't someone who would be easily dismissed or distracted. "I have clearance," she said simply, tapping the red stripes on her folder. "That tells me what you can read, not who you are." Elena smiled slightly. "Observant. That's good." She extended her hand. "Elena Voss." Marcus shook it, his grip firm but not aggressive. "Marcus Kane. And since you seem to know my rank, I'm guessing you've done your homework on this base." "Some. But you're not going to tell me why you're here." "Not yet." Marcus studied her for a long moment, then shrugged with the kind of easy confidence that suggested he didn't worry much about things outside his control. "All right, Miss Voss. Enjoy your reading. Try not to reorganize our entire operation while we're not looking." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Though if you do reorganize it, make sure the coffee gets upgraded. The stuff we have now could strip paint." Elena's smile widened fractionally. "I'll make a note." After Marcus left, the Master Chief approached her desk with renewed interest. "Ma'am, I don't mean to pry, but Commander Kane doesn't usually let people deflect his questions that easily. You must have made an impression. Or he's secure enough not to demand answers he doesn't need yet," Elena replied. The Master Chief chuckled. "That's a diplomatic way of putting it." He extended his hand. "Master Chief Daniel Torres. 22 years in, most of them right here at Coronado." Elena shook his hand, noting the calluses that spoke of hands-on work rather than desk duty. "You've seen a lot of changes, then." More than I can count. And I've learned that when someone shows up unannounced with high-level clearance and starts observing quietly, it usually means someone upstream thinks we need fixing. Or someone upstream thinks you're doing something right and wants to understand why. Torres raised an eyebrow. That's an optimistic take. Not many inspectors start with that assumption. I'm not an inspector. Then what are you? Elena returned her attention to her folder. Someone who's here to watch, learn, and eventually make some decisions. But for now, just pretend I'm part of the furniture. Torres laughed outright at that. Ma'am, with all due respect, you don't blend in as well as you think. Commander Kane's going to be curious about you for the rest of the day. And once word spreads that there's a mysterious woman with classified materials sitting in our operations center, every SEAL on this base is going to find an excuse to walk by and take a look. Then, I'll have plenty of opportunities to observe. Elena replied calmly. And she was right. Over the next 2 hours, a steady stream of personnel found reasons to enter the operations center. Some were legitimate checking schedules, reviewing training plans, coordinating equipment. Others were transparent excuses to satisfy curiosity about the stranger in their midst. Elena watched them all. She saw the young lieutenant who tried to impress her by casually mentioning his recent deployment. She saw the senior chief who assessed her with the wary respect of someone who had learned that quiet people were often the most dangerous. She saw the logistics officer who barely glanced at her, too focused on actual work to care about distractions. And she saw patterns. The way junior personnel deferred to senior leadership, but also the way they whispered about problems instead of reporting them through proper channels. The camaraderie that made this team effective, but also the informal hierarchies that sometimes bypassed official command structures. She made mental notes of everything. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, the operations center began to empty as personnel headed to the mess hall for dinner. Elena checked her watch. 1,730 hours. Perfect timing. The mess hall would be crowded, informal. The kind of environment where people's guard dropped and their true character emerged. She packed her folder, slung her duffel over her shoulder, and headed out. Master Chief Torres called after her. Ma'am, if you need directions to the visitors' mess, I know where I'm going, Master Chief. But thank you. She did know. She had memorized the base layout before arriving, studied the rhythms and routines, identified the places where she could observe without being observed. The mess hall at dinner time was perfect chaos and noise and humanity. All the things that made people forget to perform their roles and just be themselves. As Elena stepped out into the golden evening light, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Phase 1 was complete. She had arrived unnoticed, established her presence without revealing her purpose, and begun her evaluation. Tomorrow, things would get more interesting. Tomorrow, people would start asking harder questions. And soon, very soon, they would get answers that would change everything about how this base operated. But for now, Elena Voss was just another face in the crowd, another unknown variable in the complex equation of military life. And that was exactly how she wanted it. The mess hall at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado was exactly what Elena expected: controlled chaos, with an undertone of military precision. Rows of long tables filled with personnel in various states of exhaustion and hunger. The smell of grilled food mixing with salt air. The clatter of trays and the buzz of dozens of conversations, creating a wall of sound that somehow felt comforting in its familiarity. Elena grabbed a tray and moved through the line, selecting food with the automatic efficiency of someone who had done this thousands of times in dozens of different mess halls around the world. Grilled chicken, vegetables, rice. Simple, functional fuel. She filled a cup with water and scanned the room for a seat. Most tables were full, clusters of personnel bonding over shared misery or shared triumph. She spotted an empty chair at a table near the windows and made her way over, setting down her tray. With practiced ease. The three sailors already seated there looked up briefly, nodded politely, and returned to their conversation about some maintenance issue with a boat engine. They didn't ask who she was, didn't try to strike up conversation. Exactly as Elena had expected in a mess hall this size, with personnel rotating constantly, one unfamiliar face barely registered. She ate quietly, listening to the conversations around her. Learning. 2 tables over, a group of SEALs dominated the space with the kind of confident energy that came from being at the top of the military food chain. Elena recognized Marcus Kane among them, his laugh carrying across the din as he told some story that had his teammates grinning. Next to him sat a woman with short blonde hair and the kind of relaxed posture that suggested complete comfort in her environment. Lieutenant Jessica Park, if Elena's research was correct. One of the few female SEALs who had made it through Bud.S. and earned her trident. The dynamics at that table told Elena volumes. The easy camaraderie spoke of trust built through shared hardship. The way they interrupted each other without offense. The casual physical contact, shoulder bumps, fist bumps, all of it painted a picture of a team that functioned as a single unit. But there were tensions too. Subtle ones. The way one younger SEAL kept glancing at his phone, clearly worried about something. The way another pushed food around his plate without eating, his 1,000-yard stare suggesting his mind was somewhere else entirely. Small cracks in the armor that most people wouldn't notice. Elena noticed. She was halfway through her meal when Marcus Kane spotted her. His expression shifted from surprise to curiosity to amusement in the space of 3 seconds. He said something to his teammates, and several heads turned her direction. Then Marcus stood, grabbed his tray, and walked over. "Miss Voss. Funny running into you here." Elena looked up, her expression neutral. "Is it? Everyone needs to eat." "True. But I figured someone with your clearance level would rate the officers' mess, not the enlisted zoo." He gestured to the organized chaos around them. "The officers' mess has better food and worse conversation," Elena replied. "I prefer authenticity over comfort." Marcus grinned at that. "Mind if I join you? Or are you working?" "I'm always working. But sit, if you want." He settled into the chair across from her, and Elena noted that 2 of his teammates, including Lieutenant Park, had followed him over, their curiosity apparently overcoming their respect for his privacy. "Elena Voss, meet Lieutenant Jessica Park and Chief Petty Officer David Ramos," Marcus said, gesturing to his companions. "Jess, Ramos? This is the mysterious contractor consultant who's been haunting our operations center all afternoon." "Neither," Elena said simply, shaking hands with both of them. She felt Jessica's grip firm, testing, the kind of handshake that assessed while greeting. Ramos's was more relaxed, but no less evaluative. "So what are you, then?" Jessica asked, settling into a chair with the fluid grace of someone in peak physical condition. "Because you've got the whole base buzzing with theories." "Do I?" "Hell yes." Ramos chimed in. "Money's on NCIS investigator. Though some people think you're DOD Inspector General. My personal theory is CIA, but Marcus thinks you're too direct for that." Elena allowed herself a small smile. "Interesting theories. But all wrong?" Marcus pressed, leaning forward with genuine interest. "I didn't say that." Jessica laughed. "Oh, I like her. She's got the whole enigmatic thing down to an art form." Marcus studied Elena with the intensity that had probably saved his life in hostile territories. "You know what's interesting? You've been on base for less than 6 hours, and you've already established yourself as someone important enough that people are speculating about you, but mysterious enough that no one's quite willing to demand answers." That's a hell of a skill. Or, maybe I'm just a contractor reviewing training protocols. Elena suggested mildly. Yeah. And I'm just a guy who likes swimming. Ramos shot back. Come on, Miss Voss. Nobody reads classified materials in an operations center unless they're evaluating something significant. And nobody with your body language is just pushing papers. Elena raised an eyebrow. My body language? Jessica nodded. You move like someone with tactical training. Situational awareness is off the charts. I've been watching you track every person who enters your sight line. And the way you're sitting right now, back to the wall, clear view of all entrances? That's operator behavior, not contractor behavior. Smart. These three were smart. Elena had expected SEALs to be observant. It was literally what kept them alive. But she hadn't anticipated being read quite this accurately, quite this quickly. Maybe I'm just paranoid, she offered. Paranoid people don't look relaxed, Marcus countered. You look like someone who's comfortable with danger because you've lived through enough of it that it doesn't faze you anymore. That's a very specific kind of bearing. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. A tall man in officer's khakis strode into the mess hall with the kind of self-important energy that announced his arrival like a trumpet fanfare. Commander Brian Welch, according to Elena's research, the base's executive officer and a man whose career had advanced more through political connections than operational excellence. Welch had a reputation. Not a good one. His subordinates respected his rank, but not his leadership. He led through intimidation rather than inspiration, relied on protocol rather than judgment, and had a particular talent for making people feel small. Elena watched him scan the mess hall, his expression one of vague disapproval, as if the mere existence of enlisted personnel eating dinner somehow offended him. Then his eyes landed on her. His trajectory changed immediately. His path through the tables direct and purposeful. Marcus, Jessica, and Ramos noticed his approach and exchanged glances that suggested they knew exactly what was coming. Here we go, Ramos muttered. Welch stopped at their table, his posture rigid with false authority. I don't believe we've met. Commander Brian Welch, executive officer. He didn't extend his hand, which was a deliberate slight, forcing Elena to remain seated or stand and offer her hand first. A power play designed to establish dominance. Elena did neither. She simply looked up at him with calm, measuring eyes. Elena Voss. And you're here? Because? I'm here because I need to be. Welch's jaw tightened at the non-answer. This is a military installation, Miss Voss. We don't allow civilians to wander around without proper clearances and supervision. Who authorized your presence? I have the appropriate clearances. That's not what I asked. Elena set down her fork carefully, her movements deliberate. Commander Welch, I appreciate your concern for base security, but my authorization came through channels well above your pay grade, and unless you want to make some uncomfortable phone calls this evening, I suggest you accept that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. The temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. Marcus, Jessica, and Ramos sat frozen, their eyes wide with barely suppressed shock. Nobody spoke to Commander Welch like that. Nobody. Welch's face flushed red. Above my pay grade? Ma'am, I'm the executive officer of this installation. There is no authority above my pay grade when it comes to base operations. That's factually incorrect. Elena replied calmly. But I understand why you might think that. The mess hall had grown noticeably quieter. Conversations at nearby tables trailed off as personnel sensed the confrontation brewing. This was the kind of, quote, moment that would be retold in barracks and bars for months. A civilian nobody facing down the base. XO without flinching. Welch leaned down, placing both hands on the table, his voice low and threatening. I don't know who you think you are, Miss Voss, but on this base, I'm the one who decides who stays and who goes. And right now, I'm deciding that you need to collect your things and report to the security office for a proper credentialing review. No, Elena said simply. The single word hit like a slap. Welch straightened, his face now purple with rage. Excuse me? I said no, Commander. I'm not reporting to anyone, and I'm certainly not leaving because you're uncomfortable with my presence. If you have concerns about my clearances, you're welcome to contact Admiral Hawthorne at SOCOM. I'm sure he'd be happy to explain the situation to you. The mention of Admiral Hawthorne, one of the most respected and feared officers in Special Operations Command, made Welch hesitate. But his pride wouldn't let him back down completely. I don't need to contact anyone, he blustered. I'm ordering you, as the ranking officer present, to comply with my instructions. Elena stood slowly. She was several inches shorter than Welch, but somehow her presence filled more space. When she spoke, her voice carried the kind of quiet authority that didn't need volume to command attention. Commander Welch, you seem to be operating under a misunderstanding. So, let me clarify something for you. I don't take orders from you. I don't answer to you. And, if you continue this confrontation, you're going to find yourself in a position where you have to explain to your commanding officer why you attempted to interfere with a classified evaluation that has direct bearing on the future of special operations. Training. The mess hall was now completely silent. Every eye was on their table, watching this unknown woman face down the base exo without breaking a sweat. Welch opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He clearly wanted to escalate but was beginning to realize he might have misjudged the situation badly. Who exactly are you? He asked, his voice now uncertain. Someone who's going to be here for a while, Elena replied. Someone who's going to see everything you do and how you do it. And someone who's going to make recommendations that will affect your career in ways you can't anticipate. So I suggest you think very carefully about how you want this relationship to proceed. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, delivered with such calm certainty that it was somehow more intimidating than any shouted confrontation could have been. Welch stood there, for a long moment, clearly wrestling with his pride and his survival instincts. Finally, survival won. He straightened his uniform, attempted to salvage some dignity, and nodded stiffly. We'll continue this conversation later, Miss Voss. We really won't, Elena replied. But have a good evening, Commander. Welch turned and strode out of the mess hall, his departure watched by every person in the room. The moment he was gone, conversation erupted like a dam, breaking whispers and exclamations and theories flying across tables at lightning speed. Elena sat back down and picked up her fork as if nothing had happened. Marcus, Jessica, and Ramos stared at her in stunned silence. Finally, Marcus spoke. Okay, so you're definitely not a contractor. No, Elena agreed. I'm not. And you're not NCIS or CIA either. No. But you work directly with SOCOM leadership. Sometimes. Jessica leaned forward, her eyes bright with curiosity. Miss Voss, that was the single most impressive thing I've seen anyone do to Commander Welch in the 5 years I've been stationed here. He's going to make your life hell for that. He's going to try, Elena corrected. But I suspect he's going to be too busy dealing with his own problems to worry much about me. Ramos shook his head in amazement. Who are you, really? Elena met his eyes, and for just a moment, let him see past the calm mask, to the decades of experience and authority beneath. Someone who's going to change how things work around here. Starting very soon. She stood, picked up her tray, and headed toward the disposal area. Behind her, she heard Marcus say quietly to his teammates. "I don't know what's about to happen, but I get the feeling the next few days are going to be very interesting." Elena smiled to herself. He had no idea how right he was. The next morning arrived with the kind of California sunshine that made recruiting posters look honest. Elena was awake before dawn, running the perimeter of the base with the easy pace of someone who had been doing this for 30 years. Her civilian running gear, plain black shorts, and a gray navy t-shirt she'd picked up from the exchange, drew a few curious glances from early morning PT groups, but no one stopped her. She observed as she ran the condition of facilities, the enthusiasm or lack thereof in training groups, the way officers led their formations. Every detail filed away in the detailed mental map she was building of this command. By 0700, she was showered, dressed in fresh civilian clothes, and back in the operations center with her folder and a cup of the terrible coffee Marcus had complained about. He was right, it did taste like paint stripper. Master Chief Torres arrived at 0715, stopping short when he saw her already settled at her corner desk. "Ma'am, do you ever sleep?" "Occasionally," Elena replied without looking up. "Usually when there's nothing more productive to do." Torres chuckled and headed to his station. "I heard about your encounter with Commander Welch last night. Word spreads fast around here." "I imagine it does. For what it's worth, about half the base is hoping you're here to replace him, and the other half is taking bets on how long before he tries to have you removed from the installation." "What's your bet, Master Chief?" Torres grinned. "My bet is that Commander Welch is going to discover he's outmatched and is going to spend the next few weeks being very, very careful around you. Whatever you are, ma'am, you're not someone he wants to cross." "Smart man." The morning progressed with routine efficiency. Personnel rotated through the operations center on various errands. Training schedules were updated. Equipment requests were processed. The machinery of military administration ground forward with well-oiled precision. Elena continued reading, occasionally making notes in a small notebook she kept in her pocket. She was reviewing the base's emergency response protocols, the procedures for everything from medical emergencies to security breaches to natural disasters. What she found concerned her. The protocols were thorough on paper but outdated in practice. They referenced communication systems that had been upgraded 3 years ago. They assumed response times that were no longer realistic given current staffing levels. And most troubling, they showed clear signs of being written by committee, comprehensive but unwieldy, detailed but impractical. She made a note to review the actual emergency drills, not just the paperwork. The universe, it seemed, was listening. At 1047 hours, every screen in the operations center flashed red simultaneously. The calm background hum of radio chatter cut off, replaced by a harsh klaxon that made everyone's head snap up. "Emergency beacon activation," one of the duty officers called out, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "We've got an active distress signal from." "Jesus, that's from the training exercise." Torres was across the room in 3 strides. "Which training exercise?" "SEAL Team 5, sir. They're running dive certifications off Point Loma. I'm showing multiple emergency transponders activated." And the officer's face went pale. "Sir, we've lost primary communications with the dive supervisor boat." The operations center exploded into controlled chaos. Officers raced to their stations. Radio operators attempted to raise the training vessel. The duty officer pulled up GPS coordinates and started calculating response times for the nearest Coast Guard assets. Elena stood and moved to the tactical display, her eyes scanning the information flooding across the screen. She said nothing, but her mind was already processing scenarios, calculating probabilities, identifying the critical failure points in the unfolding emergency. Commander Welch burst through the door, his face flushed. What's the situation? Unknown, sir. Torres reported crisply. We have emergency beacons from the dive training exercise, but we've lost contact with the supervisor vessel. Coast Guard is being notified, and we're attempting to establish communications through alternate channels. How many personnel in the water? 12 SEALs, sir, plus 4 support crew on the boat. Welch grabbed a radio. Handset. This is Base XO. I want every available asset mobilized for search and rescue. Get me the commanding officer on the line. And, Commander. Elena's voice cut through the noise like a scalpel. Before you launch a full SAR operation, you might want to determine what actually happened. Every head in the room turned toward her. Welch's face darkened with anger. Miss Voss, this is a military emergency. I don't have time for. You have exactly as much time as those SEALs have air in their tanks. Elena interrupted, moving to stand next to Torres at the main console. Which means you have time to make smart decisions instead of panic decisions. Master Chief, pull up the last known position and overlay it with current ocean conditions. Torres hesitated, looking at Welch for guidance. The XO's jaw clenched, but something in Elena's absolute confidence made him nod curtly. Torres's fingers flew across the keyboard, and a detailed map appeared on the main screen. Elena studied it for 10 seconds. There, she said, pointing to a section of ocean floor. That's not a random equipment failure. That's a systematic communications blackout centered on that specific location. How can you possibly know that? Welch demanded. Because I've seen it before, Elena replied, her eyes never leaving the screen. Master Chief, what's the bottom composition at that location? Torres pulled up geological data. Rocky substrate with significant ferrous deposits, ma'am. Which means natural electromagnetic interference strong enough to disrupt radio communications, but not strong enough to affect emergency transponders. Elena said, your SEALs aren't in distress. They're in a dead zone, and their supervisor boat drifted into it trying to maintain visual contact. The duty officer looked up from his console. Ma'am, how do you know the boat drifted? We don't have any tracking data since communications dropped. Because that's what supervisor boats do when they lose contact with divers. They move to try to re-establish visual or sonar contact. It's instinct. But in this case, it moved them deeper into the interference zone instead of out of it. Elena turned to Welch. If you launch a full SAR operation right now, you're going to flood that area with assets that will all experience the same communication problems, which will create confusion and potentially cause an actual emergency where none currently exists. Welch stared at her, caught between his instinct to assert authority and his growing realization that she might actually know what she was talking about. What do you recommend? Send one vessel, just one, with hardened communications gear and instructions to approach from the northwest, staying in shallow water until they have visual contact with the training boat. Once they confirm the situation, they can relay through line-of-sight communications, and we can determine if we actually need SAR assets or just a tow back to clear water. And if you're wrong? Welch challenged. If those SEALs actually are in distress? Elena met his eyes. Then we've lost maybe 10 minutes, which won't matter because hypoxia from equipment failure would have already killed them before we could get assets on scene anyway. But I'm not wrong, Commander. This is a communications problem, not a survival problem. The logic was brutal but sound. Welch looked around the operations center, seeing his staff waiting for direction. He could overrule her, assert his authority, do what his instincts screamed at him to do. Or he could trust this mysterious woman who had humiliated him last night, but who now spoke with the kind of certainty that came from real experience. Do it, he said finally. Master Chief, dispatch one patrol boat with the approach vector she specified, but keep SAR assets on standby. Yes, sir, Torres replied, already transmitting orders. Elena returned to her corner desk and sat down, picking up her coffee as if she'd just commented on the weather rather than potentially preventing a disaster. But her heart was racing, her mind still running through contingencies, her instincts screaming that she'd made the right call but wouldn't be sure until that patrol boat reported back. The operations center fell into tense silence. Minutes crawled by like hours. Personnel stared at screens, willing updates to appear. Welch paced like a caged animal. His career calculations clearly visible on his face if Elena was right. She'd saved the command from an embarrassing overreaction. If she was wrong, he'd just followed the advice of a civilian and potentially killed American sailors. At 1,104 hours 17 minutes after the emergency began, the radio crackled to life. Base Ops, this is Patrol 17. We have visual contact with the training vessel. All personnel accounted for and safe. The boat experienced electrical system failure and drifted into a calm-dead zone. They're requesting a tow back to clear water and a maintenance team. No injuries, no emergency. The collective exhale in the operations center was audible. Torres grinned and shot Elena a look of pure respect. The duty officers relaxed back into their chairs. And Commander Welch stood frozen, staring at Elena with an expression that mixed relief, resentment, and something that might have been the first hint of genuine respect. Elena sipped her terrible coffee and made another note in her notebook. Miss Voss, Welch said carefully, crossing to her desk. That was impressive analysis. It was basic pattern recognition. Commander. Nothing impressive about it. Where did you learn to assess emergencies like that? Elena looked up at him, and for just a moment, let him see past the civilian clothes to the decades of experience beneath. The same place, I learned that the first response to an emergency should be analysis, not action. Panic kills more people than the actual crisis. Welch nodded slowly. I owe you an apology for last night. You don't owe me anything, Commander. But you might owe one to Master Chief Torres and your operations staff, who were ready to execute your orders efficiently, but were never asked for their assessment before you started issuing commands. The barb was delivered gently, but landed hard. Welch's expression tightened, but he nodded. Noted. He paused. For the record, I'm going to be making some calls this afternoon to find out exactly who you are and what authority you have here. Please do, Elena replied. I think you'll find the answers enlightening. After Welch left, Torres approached her desk with 2 cups of coffee, one for each of them. Ma'am, I've been doing this job for 22 years, and that's the first time I've ever seen someone walk into an emergency cold and immediately identify the actual problem instead of the apparent problem. Where did you serve? Everywhere that mattered, Master Chief. And your rank? Elena smiled. Let's just say, I outrank everyone in this room and leave it at that for now. Torres studied her face, clearly running calculations. Then his eyes widened slightly as pieces began clicking together. Ma'am, are you? Not yet, Master Chief. Elena interrupted gently. Soon. But not yet. For now, I'm still just the mysterious contractor who haunts your operations center and occasionally prevents disasters. Torres grinned. Yes, ma'am. Though I think occasionally is underselling it. The rest of the morning proceeded without incident, but the atmosphere in the operations center had shifted. Personnel who had barely acknowledged Elena's presence now watched her with cautious curiosity. The duty officers asked her opinion on minor decisions, testing whether her emergency assessment had been luck or skill. Even the junior enlisted personnel seemed more aware of her, as if some invisible barrier had been removed. Elena continued her work, but she was aware of the change. She'd crossed a threshold. She was no longer invisible, No longer just a curiosity to be speculated about. She'd proven herself valuable, which meant people would start asking harder questions. Which meant her timeline had just accelerated. At 1,200 hours, Marcus Kane entered the operations center with Lieutenant Park and Chief Ramos. They made a beeline for Elena's desk. "We heard what happened," Marcus said without preamble. "You called it perfectly." "How?" "Experience," Elena replied simply. "That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting right now." Jessica leaned against the desk, her expression thoughtful. "Miss Voss, I've been diving for 8 years. I've supervised training exercises. I've responded to actual emergencies. And I've seen a lot of so-called experts freeze or make terrible calls under pressure. What you did this morning wasn't just experience. That was command-level decision-making under ambiguity. That's a very specific skill set. Thank you for the assessment, Lieutenant." It wasn't a compliment. It was an observation. Jessica crossed her arms. "You move like an operator. You think like a commander. And you have the kind of security clearances that usually come with stars on your collar. But you're wearing civilian clothes and deflecting every direct question about who you actually are. So either you're undercover for some reason, or you're testing us to see how we react to authority that doesn't announce itself." Smart. Elena had known Jessica Park was sharp, her file showed tactical brilliance and exceptional leadership scores, but this level of analytical thinking was rare even among SEALs. "What if it's both?" Elena suggested. Ramos laughed. "Oh man. I called it. I told you she was evaluating the command. That emergency was a live test. And we just got graded." "Not a test," Elena corrected. "Those SEALs were in real danger if the situation had been mishandled. But yes, I was watching how your leadership responded under pressure. And I learned quite a bit." Marcus pulled up a chair uninvited and sat down across from her. "All right, Miss Voss. Cards on the table. You're clearly someone important. Someone with significant operational experience and high-level connections. You're evaluating this base for some purpose we don't understand yet. And based on your interaction with Commander Welch, you're not afraid of pissing off senior leadership. So here's my question. Are you here to help us or hurt us? That depends entirely on what I find." Elena replied honestly. "I'm here to evaluate operational readiness, leadership effectiveness, and the viability of new training protocols. What happens after that depends on whether this command is actually as good as it thinks it is. And if we're not," Jessica asked, "then changes will be made. Significant ones." The 3 SEALs exchanged glances, clearly communicating in the wordless way that team members developed after years of working together. Finally, Marcus nodded as if they'd reached a consensus. "All right," he said. "We're going to make a request that's probably outside protocol and might get us in trouble, but we're going to make it anyway. We want you to come observe our training. Not as an inspector or evaluator, but as a participant. Come see what we actually do, how we actually operate, and then make your assessments based on reality instead of paperwork." Elena raised an eyebrow. "You're inviting a civilian to observe SEAL training?" "We're inviting someone who clearly has operational experience to see whether our training actually prepares people for the kind of real-world scenarios you've obviously lived through," Jessica corrected. "There's a difference." It was a bold move. Risky, but also exactly the kind of initiative Elena had been hoping to see: leaders who were confident enough in their work to invite scrutiny, who cared more about getting better than protecting their egos. "I accept," Elena said. "When?" "Tomorrow, 0500. We're running a maritime interdiction scenario. Full tactical exercise with live boats, blank ammunition, and role players acting as hostile forces. It's one of our most complex training evolutions, and it'll give you a complete picture of how we operate. I'll be there." After they left, Master Chief Torres approached with a knowing smile. "Ma'am, you're about to give those SEALs the shock of their lives, aren't you?" "Why would you say that, Master Chief?" "Because I'm starting to suspect that you've run more maritime interdiction operations than their entire team combined. And tomorrow morning, they're going to figure that out." Elena's smile was answer enough. The next morning came fast and cold. Elena arrived at the training facility at 0445, dressed in borrowed fatigues that Master Chief Torres had somehow procured for her overnight. They fit reasonably well, close enough that she could move without restriction, loose enough that they didn't draw attention to her build. The training facility was a hive of pre-dawn activity. SEALs checked equipment, loaded weapons with blanks, reviewed mission briefs. The smell of coffee mixed with gun oil and salt air. Voices called out in the clipped shorthand of professionals preparing for complex operations. Marcus spotted her immediately and waved her over to where his team was staging their gear. "Miss Voss, glad you could make it. We weren't sure you'd actually show." "I don't make commitments I don't keep, Commander." "Yeah. I'm starting to realize that about you." He gestured to the organized chaos around them. "Welcome to pre-mission mayhem. We're running a scenario where a hostile vessel has been identified in restricted waters. Our team inserts via RHIB rigid hull inflatable boat approaches under cover of darkness and conducts a vessel interdiction to secure the ship and any contraband. We've got role players acting as the hostile crew and safety officers monitoring everything to prevent actual injuries." "What's the failure rate?" Elena asked. "On this exercise?" "About 40%. It's deliberately designed to test decision-making under pressure and tactical flexibility when things don't go according to plan." "Good. Plans are useless the moment you make contact anyway." Marcus grinned. "I see you've actually been there." "Once or twice." Jessica approached, carrying a tactical vest and helmet. "Miss Voss, you'll be riding in the command boat with Lieutenant Commander Kane and observing via the tactical feed. You'll be able to see what we see, hear our communications, and watch how we adapt in real time." "Actually," Elena said carefully, "I was hoping to ride in one of the assault boats. You learn more about a team's capabilities by watching them work up close than by monitoring from a distance." The request created a moment of awkward silence. Jessica and Marcus exchanged glances. "Ma'am," Marcus said diplomatically, "the assault boats are where the action happens. Things get physical fast, people moving, weapons firing blanks, a lot of controlled chaos. It's not exactly a safe observation position. I can handle controlled chaos, Commander. I've dealt with the uncontrolled version more times than I'd like to count." There was something in the way she said it, the casual certainty, the hint of hard-earned experience that made Marcus reconsider. He studied her face for a long moment, clearly trying to reconcile the civilian clothes with the military bearing, the mysterious background with the obvious competence. "All right," he said finally. "You'll ride with Chief Ramos's boat. But you follow his instructions exactly. Stay out of the way during the assault. And if he tells you to hit the deck, you hit it immediately. Understood?" "Understood." 20 minutes later, Elena was seated in the stern of a rigid hull inflatable boat, wearing a borrowed life vest and helmet, surrounded by 6 SEALs who were doing last-minute equipment checks. The boat's engine rumbled beneath her, and the pre-dawn darkness was absolute, except for the faint glow of instrument panels. Chief Ramos gave final instructions to his team, then turned to Elena. "Ma'am, when we hit the target vessel, my team will be moving fast and stacking up for entry. Your job is to stay exactly where you are and observe. Don't move unless I specifically tell you to." The role players will be firing blanks back at us, and while they're not lethal, they're loud and disorienting if you're not used to them." "I'm used to them," Elena said quietly. Something in her tone made Ramos look at her more carefully. "Ma'am, have you done maritime operations before?" "Some. Military." Elena just smiled. The boats launched at exactly 0500, cutting through the dark water with practiced efficiency. Elena watched the SEAL team work, noting their spacing, their communication discipline, the way they constantly scanned their sectors with night vision equipment. Everything was crisp, professional. Exactly what she'd expect from elite operators. But there were small things, tiny inefficiencies that most people would never notice, but that added up to wasted seconds and missed opportunities. The way one SEAL kept adjusting his gear, suggesting improper fitting. The way another was breathing too hard, suggesting inadequate cardiovascular conditioning. Small things, but things that mattered in actual combat. The target vessel appeared ahead, a medium-sized cargo ship serving as the training target. Role players were positioned throughout the ship, ready to provide realistic opposition. Safety officers in marked vests monitored from predetermined positions. 2 minutes. Ramos called softly into his radio. His team tensed, weapons coming up, their postures shifting from relaxed alertness to coiled readiness. The approach was textbook perfect. The RHIBs split up, approaching from multiple angles to divide the defender's attention. Grappling hooks deployed with muffled thumps. SEALs swarmed up the sides of the vessel like predatory spiders. Then things started going wrong. Not actually wrong, this was the designed chaos Marcus had mentioned. The curveballs thrown at the team to test their adaptability. One of the entry points was booby-trapped with a smoke generator that suddenly obscured visibility. Role players appeared in unexpected locations, forcing the SEALs to adapt their assault patterns. Communications became garbled as the scenario introduced simulated equipment failures. Elena watched it all with the calm assessment of someone who had seen real versions of these problems too many times to count. And she saw where the team struggled, not in their tactics, which were solid, but in their decision-making speed. When the situation deviated from the plan, they hesitated. Only for seconds, but seconds mattered. "Chief Ramos," Elena said quietly, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos. "Your point man is about to walk into a choke point with no cover and no backup. He needs to hold position until his number 2 can provide overwatch from that elevated position." She pointed to a platform visible through the smoke. Ramos's head snapped around to look at her, then to look at where she was pointing. His eyes widened slightly as he realized she was right. His point man was indeed about to make a dangerous tactical error. "Hold position," Ramos barked into his radio. 2. "Get elevation on my mark." The team adjusted smoothly, and the assault continued without the mistake Elena had spotted. But now Ramos was looking at her with an expression that mixed confusion with dawning realization. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "how did you see that? You're not on the tactical net, you don't have night vision, and you've never run this exercise before." "I've run enough operations to recognize patterns," Elena replied. "Your team is excellent, Chief. But they're trained to follow plans, and real operations rarely survive contact with the enemy. They need to trust their instincts more and their briefings less." The exercise continued for another 20 minutes, and Elena remained exactly where Ramos had told her to stay, but she provided 3 more tactical observations, each one preventing a mistake before it happened. Each one delivered in the same calm, certain tone. Each one absolutely correct. By the time the training scenario ended with the target vessel secured and role players subdued, Ramos was staring at Elena like she was a ghost. "Ma'am," he said, as the boats powered back toward the base, "I need to ask you something directly. and I'm hoping you'll give me a straight answer. Ask. You're not a contractor. You're not a civilian observer. You're military, aren't you? Active duty, high rank, probably someone with extensive operational experience in exactly this kind of mission profile. Elena met his eyes in the growing dawn light. What makes you think that? Because nobody spots tactical errors that fast unless they've made them before or trained people who made them. Nobody understands assault patterns that instinctively unless they've run them hundreds of times. And nobody stays that calm in the middle of a kinetic exercise unless combat is their normal operating environment. He paused. So who are you? Really? Before Elena could answer, Marcus's voice crackled over the radio. All boats, return to base. We'll debrief in 30 minutes. And someone tell Miss Voss that she's just been promoted from observer to honorary team advisor, because apparently she sees things the rest of us miss. The RHIBs cut through the morning water, the sun finally breaking over the horizon and painting everything gold. Elena felt the weight of the moment, the inflection point where her evaluation was about to become something more, where her careful anonymity was about to crack open whether she was ready or not. Chief Ramos, she said quietly, when we get back to base, I think it's time for some direct conversations. But not with just you. With Commander Kane, Lieutenant Park, and probably Master Chief Torres. Because what I'm about to tell you is going to change how you think about this entire command. Ramos nodded slowly. Yes, ma'am. Though I have to say, I'm not sure anything you tell us could be more surprising than watching you casually quarterback a SEAL assault like you've been doing it your whole career. Elena allowed herself a small smile. Chief, you have no idea. The debriefing room was windowless and utilitarian gray walls, fluorescent lighting, a large screen for reviewing tactical footage, and a conference table surrounded by chairs. Marcus's team filed in, still wearing their tactical gear, faces flushed from exertion and the adrenaline come down that followed every training exercise. Elena entered last, still in her borrowed fatigues, carrying herself with that same quiet confidence that had first caught Marcus's attention 2 days ago. But now, after watching her provide tactical guidance that saved his team from multiple training failures, that confidence felt less mysterious and more like exactly what it was, earned authority that didn't need announcement. All right, everyone grab a seat, Marcus said, moving to the head of the table. Before we review the footage, I want to address something unusual that happened during the exercise. The team settled into chairs, their attention focused. Jessica Park sat with her arms crossed, her expression curious. Ramos looked like someone who just figured out the answer to a riddle but wasn't quite ready to believe it. Other team members glanced between Marcus and Elena, clearly aware that something significant was happening but unsure what. Miss Voss, Marcus continued, provided real-time tactical observations during the assault that prevented at least 4 significant errors. Errors that, in a real operational environment, could have resulted in casualties or mission failure. He gestured to Elena. I think we all owe her our thanks, and more importantly, I think we deserve an explanation of how a civilian contractor has the kind of tactical awareness that rivals our most experienced operators. The room fell silent. Every eye on Elena. She stood near the back wall. Her posture relaxed but her expression serious. This was the moment she'd been building toward, the point where continued anonymity would do more harm than good, where trust required transparency. Commander Kane is right, Elena said, moving to stand near the screen. You deserve an explanation. But before I provide one, I want you to understand why I've been operating the way I have for the past 2 days. She pressed a button on the remote, and the screen flickered to life, showing the official seal of Naval Special Warfare Command. This base is under evaluation, Elena continued. her voice taking on a formal edge. Not for disciplinary reasons, and not because anyone believes you're failing, but because SOCOM is redesigning how we train special operations personnel, and this command has been selected as the pilot program for new protocols. My job has been to assess your current capabilities, identify strengths and weaknesses, and determine whether this team can handle the responsibility of being the model that other commands will follow. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more inspiring military stories like this one. Marcus leaned forward, his expression intent. And you've been doing that assessment while pretending to be a civilian because people perform differently when they know they're being evaluated, Elena replied. I needed to see how this command actually operates, not how it operates when it's trying to impress inspectors. I needed to see real leadership, real decision-making, real problems, and how they're solved. That's reasonable, Jessica said carefully. But it doesn't explain your tactical expertise. Evaluators are usually staff officers or training specialists, not people who can quarterback assault operations in real time. Elena nodded. You're right, Lieutenant. Which brings me to the explanation you're owed. She clicked the remote again, and the screen changed. What appeared made several team members sit up straight. It was a service record. Name: Elena Maria Voss. Rank: Rear Admiral, upper half. Current assignment: Commander, Naval Special Warfare Command. The silence in the room was absolute. Marcus's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, disbelief, dawning comprehension, and finally something that might have been horror mixed with profound respect. Holy shit, Ramos whispered. Elena let them process for a moment before continuing. I've been in the Navy for 32 years. I started as an intelligence officer, transitioned to Special Operations Liaison, and spent 15 years coordinating SEAL operations across 3 combatant commands. I've planned missions in 14 countries. I've been in hostile fire zones more times than I care to count. And I've watched good people die because of bad decisions, bad training, or bad leadership. She clicked through several more screens, commendation medals, operational summaries with details redacted, photographs of her in uniform standing with various SEAL teams in various locations that ranged from jungle to desert to Arctic environments. 6 months ago, Elena continued, I was promoted to flag rank and given command of NSW. My first priority was to evaluate whether our training protocols actually prepare people for modern operational realities, or whether we're teaching them to fight the last war instead of the next one. This base was selected because you have a reputation for innovation and excellence. My job was to determine if that reputation is deserved. Jessica found her voice. First, Admiral, with all due respect, why the civilian clothes? Why not just arrive in uniform and conduct a formal inspection? Because formal inspections tell me what you want me to see. Elena replied, I needed to see what you didn't think anyone was watching. How Commander Welch treats personnel he thinks are beneath his notice. How your operations center handles emergencies when there's no brass watching. How your team makes decisions when you think a civilian contractor is observing instead of your commanding officer. She moved closer to the table, her expression softening slightly. And I needed to know whether you were secure enough in your capabilities to invite scrutiny. Commander Kane, when you asked me to observe your training, that told me more about your leadership than any after-action report could convey. You weren't afraid of being evaluated. You wanted to know if you could get better. That's the mark of truly exceptional operators. Marcus was still processing, his mind clearly racing through every interaction they'd had, every casual comment, every moment where he'd treated an admiral like a peer. Ma'am, I called you Miss Voss to your face. Multiple times. I made jokes about You treated me like a human being instead of a rank. Elena interrupted gently. You showed me who you actually are, not who you think you should be around flag officers. That's exactly what I needed to see, Commander. Ramos shook his head slowly. The emergency yesterday. You didn't just happen to know how to handle that situation. You've commanded emergency responses at the operational level, probably for years. Combat search and rescue coordination in the Mediterranean, counter-piracy operations off Somalia, hostage rescue in the Philippines. Elena confirmed. I've seen every variation of things going wrong, which is why I knew yesterday's situation wasn't an actual emergency. It was a communications problem that panic would have turned into a real crisis. One of the younger SEALs raised his hand tentatively, then seemed to remember this wasn't a classroom, and lowered it. Admiral, what about Commander Welch? When you faced him down in the mess hall? Elena's expression hardened slightly. Commander Welch exemplifies a leadership problem that exists throughout the Navy: officers who lead through intimidation rather than inspiration, who care more about their authority than their mission, and who create toxic environments that drive away talented people. His interaction with me confirmed that he treats everyone he perceives as inferior with the same dismissive arrogance. That kind of leadership is unacceptable, and it will be addressed. Are you going to have him removed? Marcus asked carefully. That depends on whether he's capable of changing. I'll be having a very direct conversation with Commander Welch later today, and his response will determine his future. But that's not your concern right now. Your concern is understanding that everything you've done over the past 2 days has been evaluated, and you need to know the results. The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. These were elite warriors, the best the Navy had to offer, but they were also human beings who cared deeply about their performance and their reputation. The idea that they'd been under evaluation while treating their evaluator like a casual acquaintance was clearly causing various degrees of stress. Elena smiled for the first time since revealing her identity. You can all breathe. Your performance has been exceptional. Not perfect, we'll discuss specific improvements in a moment, but well above the standard I was hoping to find. This team demonstrates exactly the kind of tactical flexibility, innovative thinking, and professional leadership that we need to scale across the entire special warfare community. The collective exhale was audible. However, Elena continued, her tone becoming more businesslike. There are specific areas where improvement is needed. Chief Ramos, your point man has an equipment fitting issue that's affecting his mobility. Lieutenant Park, your communication discipline under stress needs refinement. You're using too many words when brevity would be more effective. And Commander Kane, you're making excellent tactical decisions, but you're second-guessing yourself more than you should. Trust your instincts. They're solid. The feedback was specific, actionable, and delivered without criticism, just observation and guidance. The team members nodded, clearly taking mental notes. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena continued, I'll be conducting a comprehensive assessment of this entire command. Training protocols, leadership effectiveness, operational readiness, everything. Some of you will be interviewed formally. All of you will be observed during your normal duties. And at the end of that process, I'll be making recommendations that will shape the future of SEAL training for the next decade. She paused, letting the weight of that statement settle. But I want to be clear about something. I'm not here to find problems. I'm here to find solutions. This command is already good. My job is to help make it exceptional. And based on what I've seen so far, retries continue, I think you're ready for that challenge. Jessica leaned back in her chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Admiral, I have to say, this is the most elaborate and effective leadership assessment I've ever experienced. You got us to show you exactly who we are by making us think we were showing someone who didn't matter. You all matter, Lieutenant. Elena corrected. Every single person in this room, from the newest team member to Commander Kane, represents the tip of the spear for American Special Operations. What you do here, how you train, how you lead it ripples out to affect operations worldwide. That's why this evaluation matters so much. Marcus stood, and the rest of the team immediately followed suit, coming to attention. It was an instinctive response the moment the civilian contractor transformed into the admiral. Years of military bearing kicked in automatically. At ease, Elena said quietly. And for the record, when we're in informal settings like this, you can call me ma'am or Admiral Voss. But I'm not a fan of unnecessary formality. I spent too many years in the field with operators like you to forget what actually matters. Mission effectiveness. Not military theater. Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied. And Elena could see him recalibrating his entire understanding of the past 2 days. I have to ask, what gave me the courage to invite you to observe our training? Was that part of your plan? No, Elena admitted. That was you being a better leader than I expected. Most officers at your level would have tried to keep me at arm's length. Control what I saw. Manage my perception. You did the opposite. You invited scrutiny, because you were confident enough to believe your work would speak for itself. That's rare, Commander. And it's valuable. Ramos raised his hand slightly. A gesture somewhere between military protocol and casual question. Admiral, the tactical observations you made during the exercise, how many operations have you actually run? Personally planned and coordinated. 273. Participated in directly? 47. Though most of those were in advisory or liaison roles. I'm not a SEAL, Chief. I've never claimed to be. But I've worked with SEAL teams long enough to understand how you operate, what makes you effective, and what gets you killed. 47. Jessica repeated softly. Ma'am, that's more direct operational experience than most flag officers accumulate in their entire careers. Which is exactly why I was selected for this position, Elena replied. The Navy doesn't need another administrator at NSW Command. It needs someone who understands the operational reality of modern warfare and can translate that understanding into training protocols that actually prepare people for what they'll face. She clicked through several more screens, showing photographs of various operations, some in desert environments, some maritime, some urban. In many of the photos, a younger Elena stood in tactical gear alongside SEAL teams, her face serious, her presence clearly accepted by the operators around her. These were Joint Task Force operations in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, the Philippines, Somalia, and half a dozen other places I can't mention, Elena explained. I wasn't kicking doors, but I was in the Tactical Operations Center, making real-time decisions that affected whether you came home alive or in a flag-draped coffin. That's the weight I carried for 15 years, and it's why I take training so seriously. Every mistake we make in training is a lesson that might save a life in combat. The room had gone quiet again, but this time, the silence was different, not shock or confusion, but respect. These operators understood viscerally what it meant to carry responsibility for other people's lives. They recognized a kindred spirit. Regardless of rank or position, Marcus cleared his throat. Admiral, what happens now? With us, I mean. Do we continue training as normal, or does your presence change how we operate? You continue as normal, Elena said firmly. The worst thing that could happen would be for you to start performing for me instead of performing for mission success. I'll be observing, asking questions, occasionally participating in discussions. But I'm not here to micromanage or second-guess your tactical decisions. You're the experts in your field. I'm just here to learn from you and to share what I've learned from other commands. And Commander Welch? Ramos asked, then immediately looked like he regretted the question. Sorry, ma'am, that's not my business. It's everyone's business when poor leadership affects operational effectiveness. Elena replied. Commander Welch will be counseled on his leadership approach. He'll be given the opportunity to change his behavior and his attitude. If he can't, or won't, he'll be reassigned to a position where his particular skills are better utilized and his particular flaws do less damage. But that decision will be made by his commanding officer with my input, not by me unilaterally. She pulled out her phone and checked the time. It's now 0730. I'm sure you all have training schedules and responsibilities to get back to. But before you go, I want to say something important. What happened in this room stays in this room for now. The rest of the base doesn't need to know my identity yet. I still have evaluations to complete, and I still need to see how people behave when they think I'm just a contractor. Is that clear? Yes, ma'am. The team responded in unison. Good. Dismissed. Commander Kane, Lieutenant Park, Chief Ramos, please stay for a moment. The rest of the team filed out, and Elena could hear their excited whispers the moment they hit the corridor. Word would spread. She knew, despite her instructions. That was inevitable. But she'd bought herself at least a few more hours of relative anonymity. When the door closed, she turned to the 3 remaining officers. I asked you to stay because you 3 are going to be my primary liaisons during this evaluation. I need people who understand this command from the inside, who can provide honest assessments without worrying about political fallout, and who care more about improving than about protecting egos. Based on what I've seen, you 3 fit that description. Marcus nodded slowly. We're honored, Admiral. What do you need from us? Honesty. If you see me making incorrect assumptions, correct me. If you think I'm missing something important, tell me. If you believe my recommendations will cause more problems than they solve, push back. I don't need yes men. I need professionals who will help me get this right. You'll get honesty, ma'am, Jessica promised. Though I have to warn you, once Ramos gets comfortable, he doesn't have much of a filter. Ramos grinned. The Admiral invited me to be honest. I'm taking that as permission to speak freely. Within reason, Chief, Elena said with a slight smile. I still outrank you significantly. Yes, ma'am. But you also just spent 2 days pretending to be a civilian and letting Commander Kane flirt with you. So I'm thinking you're not too worried about traditional military hierarchy. Marcus's face went red. I did not flirt. You absolutely did, sir. Jessica interrupted, barely suppressing a laugh. You did that whole casual lean thing at the mess hall. And you definitely tried to impress her with your deployment stories. I was being friendly, not flirting. Marcus protested, then looked at Elena with obvious embarrassment. Admiral, I apologize if my behavior was inappropriate. Elena waved off the concern. Commander, you were being human, which is exactly what I needed to see. And for the record, your deployment stories were actually interesting. You have good tactical instincts and you learn from experience, which is exactly what I look for in leaders I'm considering for advancement. That statement hung in the air for a moment. Marcus processed the implications carefully. Advancement, ma'am? We'll discuss it later, Elena said. For now, I need you 3 to help me understand something that's been bothering me since I arrived. This base has excellent personnel, solid training protocols, and a strong operational record. But there's an undercurrent of inefficiency that I can't quite identify. Small things, response times that are slower than they should be. Communication gaps. Resource allocation that doesn't make sense. It's not bad enough to affect mission readiness, but it's present. What am I missing? The three officers exchanged glances, clearly having a silent conversation. Finally, Jessica spoke. Admiral, it's Commander Welch. And not just him personally, but the culture he's created. He prioritizes appearances over substance, politics over performance. People spend time managing his ego instead of focusing on training. Resources get diverted to make inspections look good instead of being used where they're actually needed. And anyone who pushes back gets punished through bad assignments or blocked promotions. Give me specific examples, Elena said, pulling out her notebook. For the next 30 minutes, the three officers provided detailed accounts of how Welch's leadership had created a culture of risk aversion and political calculation. None of it was dramatic, no scandals, no criminal behavior, just the slow corrosion of institutional effectiveness that happened when bad leaders were allowed to persist in positions of authority. Elena took notes, asked clarifying questions, and felt her initial assessment solidifying into certainty. Commander Welch wasn't malicious. He was simply mediocre. And mediocrity in leadership positions was often more damaging than outright incompetence because it was harder to identify and easier to excuse. Thank you, she said finally, closing her notebook. This confirms what I suspected. I'll be having a conversation with your commanding officer this afternoon, and Commander Welch's situation will be addressed promptly. What about us? Ramos asked. Once people figure out who you really are, how do we handle questions about why we knew and didn't tell anyone? By telling the truth that you were operating under my direct orders to maintain operational security during an evaluation period. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me. Elena stood, signaling the meeting was ending. Now, all of you need to get back to your normal duties. And I need to continue my evaluation. We'll meet again tomorrow morning to discuss specific training protocol recommendations. The three officers stood and moved toward the door. As they reached it, Marcus turned back. Admiral, can I ask you something personal? You can ask. I may not answer. Why do this job? You could have taken a desk position at the Pentagon, something prestigious and safe. Instead, you're here, in the field, doing the hard work of actually improving how we operate. Why? Elena was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Commander, have you ever lost someone under your command? Marcus's expression darkened. Yes, ma'am. Afghanistan, 2019. One of my team members was killed when our vehicle hit an IED. Then you know the weight of that loss. You know how it follows you, how you replay every decision wondering if you could have done something different. Elena's voice was soft, but carried the weight of experience. I've lost 47 people during operations I coordinated. 47 men and women who trusted me to make good decisions, who relied on my judgment, who died because despite my best efforts, I couldn't account for every variable. She met Marcus's eyes directly. I do this job because every improvement in training, every lesson learned and properly applied, every bad leader removed and good leader promoted, all of it might mean one less flag-draped coffin, one less family destroyed, one less operator who doesn't come home. That's why I'm here, Commander. Because I've carried enough grief, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let preventable mistakes add to that burden. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Marcus nodded. Yes, ma'am. I understand. After they left, Elena remained in the debriefing room alone, staring at the screen still showing her service record. 47 people. She remembered every name, every face, every circumstance. The weight of command was something she'd carried for so long it had become part of her, an invisible burden that shaped every decision. Her phone buzzed. A text from Master Chief Torres. Admiral, Commander Welch is requesting an urgent meeting. He says he needs to speak with you immediately. Should I schedule it? Elena smiled grimly. Her calls had been returned. The information had filtered up through channels. And now, Commander Welch knew exactly who he'd been dismissing and threatening for the past 2 days. She typed back, "My office, in 30 minutes. And Master Chief, make sure the base commanding officer is available this afternoon. We have personnel matters to discuss." "Yes, ma'am." Elena gathered her materials and headed out into the California sunshine. The base looked different now, seen through the lens of her revealed identity. Soon, everyone would know. Soon, the careful evaluation would transform into something more official and more consequential. But first, she had a conversation to have with Commander Welch. And based on what she'd learned over the past 2 days, it was going to be a conversation he would never forget. Elena requisitioned a small office in the administration building, nothing fancy. Just 4 walls, a desk, 2 chairs, and a window overlooking the training grounds. Master Chief Torres had ensured a proper nameplate was mounted outside. Raid M. Elena M. Voss, Commander, Naval Special Warfare Command. She sat behind the desk in her civilian clothes, the same jeans and button-down shirt she'd been wearing since arrival, and waited. The dichotomy was deliberate. Let Welch see the person he'd dismissed before he had to confront the rank he'd insulted. At precisely 0800, there was a sharp knock on the door. "Enter." Commander Brian Welch stepped inside, and the transformation from 2 days ago was stark. His face was pale, his posture rigid with tension, his eyes carrying the haunted look of someone who had just realized the magnitude of his mistake. He came to attention immediately, his salute crisp and held longer than regulation required. "Admiral Voss." Commander Brian Welch reporting. "As ordered, ma'am." Elena returned the salute casually, then gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down, Commander." He sat, his back ramrod straight, hands folded precisely in his lap. Every inch of his body language screamed that he was preparing for the worst. Elena let him sit in uncomfortable silence for a moment, studying him with the same calm assessment she'd used throughout her evaluation. "Commander Welch," she began finally, "I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. When you confronted me in the mess hall 2 nights ago, what were you thinking?" Welch swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I believed you were an unauthorized civilian on a secure military installation. My responsibility as executive officer includes base security, and I was attempting to verify your credentials and authority." "That's what you tell yourself," Elena said quietly. "Now tell me the truth." The silence stretched out. Welch's jaw worked as he wrestled with pride, self-preservation, and the dawning understanding that this conversation would define the rest of his career. "I was angry," he admitted finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "You challenged my authority in front of personnel. You made me look foolish. I wanted to put you in your place." "There it is," Elena said, not unkindly. "The truth. Commander, do you understand what you actually revealed in that moment? That I have a problem with ego, ma'am. That's part of it. But the deeper issue is that you lead through intimidation rather than inspiration. You care more about your authority than your mission. And most concerning, you treat people differently based on whether you perceive them as threats to your status or tools for your advancement." Each word landed like a physical blow. Welch's face went through several shades of red and white. "Over the past 2 days," Elena continued, "I've observed how you interact with enlisted personnel, junior officers, and civilians you think are beneath your notice. I've watched you dismiss good ideas because they didn't come from the right source. I've seen you prioritize appearance over substance, politics over performance, and I've documented multiple instances where your leadership style has directly degraded operational effectiveness. She pulled out her notebook and opened it to a marked page. Your response time during yesterday's emergency was delayed by 47 seconds because you spent that time establishing your authority instead of assessing the situation. Your interference with training schedules last week caused a 20% increase in equipment conflicts because you wanted photo opportunities during inspections rather than efficient resource allocation. And 3 promising junior officers have requested transfers from this command specifically because they can't work under your leadership. Welch's hands had started trembling. Admiral, I'm not finished, Commander. Elena's voice remained calm, but it carried steel underneath. Here's what concerns me most. You're not incompetent. Your record shows solid tactical knowledge, decent administrative skills, and moments of genuine leadership capability. But somewhere along the way, you forgot that rank is a responsibility, not a privilege. You started believing that your authority came from your position rather than earning it through competence and character. She closed the notebook. So now we're at a decision point. I can recommend your removal from this position immediately. Your behavior over the past 2 days provides sufficient documentation for a relief for cause that would effectively end your career progression. Or, I can give you an opportunity to change, to remember why you joined the Navy, to become the leader you're capable of being instead of the one you've allowed yourself to become. Welch looked up, and Elena saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected, not hope exactly, but a desperate desire for redemption. What would that look like, ma'am? He asked quietly. It would look like you spending the next 6 months in a leadership development program working directly with Master Chief Torres, who is going to teach you what you should have learned years ago, that respect is earned, not demanded. It would look like you personally apologizing to every person you've dismissed or mistreated. It would look like you demonstrating through consistent action that you're more interested in serving your personnel than being served by them. She leaned forward. And it would look like you understanding that this is your last chance, Commander. One more incident of the leadership style I've observed, one more example of prioritizing your ego over your mission, and you're done. Not just at this command, but in the Navy. Am I clear? Crystal clear, ma'am. Good. You're dismissed. Report to Master Chief Torres at 0900 for your first leadership coaching session. And, Commander, leave your pride at the door. The Master Chief has my full authority to run you through the ringer, and trust me, he will. Welch stood, saluted, and moved toward the door. As he reached it, he turned back. Admiral, may I ask why you're giving me this opportunity? After what I did, you'd be justified in ending my career. Elena considered the question. Because I've learned that sometimes good people make bad decisions, and sometimes bad habits can be broken if someone cares enough to try. You're not a bad person, Commander Welch. You're just a mediocre leader who's been allowed to persist in that mediocrity because no one had the courage to hold you accountable. I'm holding you accountable. What you do with that is up to you. After he left, Elena sat back in her chair and exhaled slowly. One problem addressed. About 100 more to go. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Admiral, the word is out. Everyone knows who you are. The entire base is buzzing. Elena typed. Back. Good. Time to stop hiding and start leading. Gather your team. Training grounds. 1,000 hours. Full command presence. Yes, ma'am. At 1,000 hours, Elena stepped out onto the main training grounds of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. She'd changed into her service uniform the first time she'd worn it since arriving. The khaki fabric was crisp, the ribbons on her chest told a story of decades of service, and the 2 silver stars on her collar caught the sunlight like small beacons. The effect was immediate and profound. Personnel, who had been moving across the ground, stopped mid-stride. Conversations died mid-sentence. A ripple of awareness spread outward from her position like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Marcus, Jessica, and Ramos, stood at attention near the training facility entrance. And as Elena approached, Marcus called out in a voice that carried across the entire grounds, "Officer on deck! Attention!" The response was instantaneous and overwhelming. Hundreds of personnel, SEALs, support staff, administrative personnel, trainers, everyone within sight snapped to attention with a precision that would have made parade ground instructors weep with joy. Elena walked through the formation, her bearing calm and professional, acknowledging the salutes that came from every direction. But she was aware of something beneath the military protocol, genuine curiosity mixed with respect, the kind of attention that came when people realized they'd been living and working alongside someone significant without knowing it. Master Chief Torres met her at the center of the grounds. He saluted sharply, and Elena caught the slight smile on his weathered face. "Admiral on deck," he announced formally, then added more quietly, "Welcome to your command, ma'am." Officially this time. "Thank you, Master Chief." At ease, everyone. The formation relaxed fractionally, but every eye remained locked on Elena. She took a moment to look around, making eye contact with as many people as possible, letting them see that she wasn't some distant authority figure but a real person who'd been walking among them. "I'm Rear Admiral Elena Voss," she began, her voice carrying across the silent training grounds. "And I owe all of you an explanation for what's been happening over the past 2 days." She could see the attention sharpen, personnel leaning forward slightly to catch every word. "I arrived at this base 3 days ago in civilian clothes, with no announcement, no ceremony, and no official notification. I presented myself as a contractor conducting routine evaluations. I sat in your operations center, ate in your mess hall, and observed your training exercises without revealing my identity or my purpose." A few murmurs rippled through the formation. Elena let them settle naturally. "I did this because I needed to see who you really are. Not who you are when admirals are watching. Not who you are during formal inspections, but who you are when you think no one important is paying attention. Because that's when character shows, when leadership is tested, when the true quality of a command becomes visible." She began walking along the formation, her tone conversational but carrying authority. "And what I saw impressed me. I saw junior enlisted personnel helping each other without being ordered to. I saw officers making hard decisions under pressure. I saw innovation and dedication and professionalism that exceeded my expectations. I saw a command that doesn't just talk about excellence, it lives it." The pride that spread through the formation was visible, shoulders straightening, chins lifting slightly. "But I also saw problems," Elena continued, her tone becoming more serious. "I saw inefficiencies that shouldn't exist. I saw communication gaps that slow response times. I saw leadership behaviors that undermine rather than support. And I saw small habits that, if left uncorrected, will eventually compromise your operational effectiveness." The formation tensed again. This was the moment where praise turned into criticism, where evaluations became consequences. "Here's what's going to happen," Elena said, stopping at the center and turning to face the entire assembly. "Over the next 2 weeks, I will be conducting a comprehensive assessment of this command. Every training protocol, every operational procedure, every leadership decision will be evaluated. Some of you will be interviewed. All of you will be observed. And at the end of that process, changes will be made." She let that sink in before continuing. "But these changes aren't punitive. They're developmental. This command has been selected as the pilot program for next-generation SEAL training protocols. You're going to be the model that other commands follow, the standard by which special operations training is measured. That's an honor, but it's also a massive responsibility." Marcus stepped forward and saluted. "Admiral, permission to speak?" "Granted, Commander." "Ma'am, on behalf of this command, I want to say that we're ready for that responsibility. We're ready to be challenged, to improve, to set the standard. And we're grateful that you trusted us enough to see us as we actually are before judging what we could become." It was a perfect statement, acknowledging the evaluation while expressing confidence without arrogance. Elena made a mental note that Marcus Kane was someone to watch for future advancement. "Thank you, Commander. Your team has already demonstrated exactly the kind of adaptability and professionalism I'm looking for." She turned back to the formation. "I want to be clear about something. I'm not here to find reasons to punish people. I'm here to find reasons to promote them, to recognize excellence, to ensure that good work is rewarded and bad habits are corrected. Some of you are going to discover that your careers are about to accelerate. Others are going to discover that you have work to do. All of you are going to discover that mediocrity is no longer acceptable in this command." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the hundreds of faces watching her. "One more thing. Some of you witnessed my interactions with Commander Welch over the past few days. You saw him attempt to assert authority over someone he believed was a civilian contractor. You saw him prioritize his ego over operational professionalism. And you're probably wondering what consequences that will have." The formation was absolutely silent now, everyone aware they were witnessing something significant. "Commander Welch has been counseled," Elena said carefully. "He's been given an opportunity to correct his leadership approach and demonstrate that he can be the officer his rank requires him to be. He'll remain in his position but will be under direct mentorship from Master Chief Torres. If he succeeds in changing his behavior, he'll emerge as a better leader. If he fails, he'll be removed. Either way, the message is clear. Rank without character is meaningless, and authority without competence is worthless." She could see the impact of those words: relief from junior personnel who'd suffered under Welch's leadership, respect from senior enlisted who appreciated accountability, and perhaps a touch of concern from other officers who were suddenly wondering if their own leadership would withstand similar scrutiny. "This command is too important for anything less than excellence," Elena concluded. "You are too important. The missions you'll be asked to execute, the lives that will depend on your training, the national security interests that rest on your shoulders, all of it demands that we be better, continuously and consistently. I'm here to help you achieve that, not through intimidation or punishment, but through honest assessment, practical guidance, and the kind of leadership that inspires rather than demands." She came to attention. "Thank you for your service. Thank you for your dedication. And thank you for letting me see who you really are." "Dismissed." Master Chief Torres's voice rang out. "Dismissed." The formation broke, but instead of the usual rush to get back to work, personnel moved slowly, in clusters, talking in low voices. Elena could feel the energy, not anxiety, exactly, but a heightened awareness that things were changing, that standards were being raised, that mediocrity was no longer an option. As the crowd dispersed, a young petty officer approached hesitantly. He couldn't have been more than 23, with the kind of earnest expression that suggested he'd been rehearsing this moment in his head. "Admiral Voss, ma'am?" Elena turned. "Yes, Petty Officer Chen." "Ma'am." "Petty Officer Second Class David Chen." He came to attention and saluted. Elena returned the salute. "What can I do for you, Petty Officer Chen?" "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, I was in the operations center when you handled that emergency 2 days ago. I watched you identify the problem when everyone else was panicking. And I realized that's what real leadership looks like: calm under pressure, decisive without being reckless, confident without being arrogant." He paused, clearly nervous but committed to finishing. "I want to be that kind of leader someday. Thank you for showing us what that looks like." The simple statement hit Elena harder than she expected. This was why she did this work, not for the medals or the rank, but for moments like this, when someone young and idealistic saw what leadership could be and wanted to emulate it. Petty Officer Chen, what's your rate? Operations Specialist, ma'am. How long have you been at this command? 18 months, ma'am. And what are your career goals? Chen straightened even more, if that was possible. I want to advance to chief, ma'am. I want to be the kind of senior enlisted that people trust in emergencies, the kind who makes good decisions and teaches others to do the same. Elena nodded slowly. Then, I'm going to give you an assignment. For the next 2 weeks, you're going to shadow Master Chief Torres. You're going to watch how he leads, how he makes decisions, how he mentors junior personnel. You're going to learn what it actually takes to be the kind of chief you aspire to become. And at the end of those 2 weeks, you're going to write me a report on what you learned. Chen's eyes widened. Ma'am. Yes. Ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Don't thank me yet. Master Chief Torres is going to work you harder than you've ever been worked. But if you can keep up, if you can learn what he has to teach, you'll be on a fast track to advancement. Does that sound like something you want? Absolutely, ma'am. Good. Report to the Master Chief at 0600 tomorrow. And Chen? Don't let me down. I won't, ma'am. I promise. As Chen hurried off, clearly excited and terrified in equal measure, Jessica approached with a slight smile. Making promises already, Admiral? You've been officially revealed for less than an hour. That young man just showed more leadership potential in 2 minutes than some officers show in their entire careers. Elena replied. He deserves an opportunity. Agreed. But you realize you just became the personal hero of every junior enlisted person on this base, right? Word's going to spread that you're actually invested in their advancement, not just managing them. Good. That's how it should be. Elena started walking toward the operations center, and Jessica fell into step beside her. Lieutenant, tell me something honestly. How much resistance am I going to face from the officer corps? How many people are going to resent having their command shaken up by an outsider? Jessica considered the question carefully. Some will resent it. Change is always uncomfortable, and you're threatening comfortable mediocrity. But most are going to be relieved. We've all known things could be better. We've all seen problems that needed fixing. But no one had the authority or the courage to actually fix them. You have both. They reached the operations center, and Elena paused at the entrance. What about you, Lieutenant? How do you feel about all this? Honestly. Jessica met her eyes directly. I'm excited. For the first time in my career, I feel like someone in leadership actually understands what we do down here. Someone who's been in the field, who knows what works, and what's just theater. That's rare, ma'am. And it's valuable. Even if it means your own leadership gets scrutinized. Especially then. I don't want to be comfortable in my mediocrity. I want to be challenged to be better. That's why I became a SEAL. Elena smiled. Lieutenant Park, you just earned yourself additional responsibilities. I'm going to need people I can trust to give me honest feedback during this evaluation. People who aren't afraid to tell me when I'm wrong or when my recommendations won't work in practice. Are you willing to be one of those people? Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Good. Because starting tomorrow, you're going to be my liaison for all training protocol evaluations. You'll attend planning meetings, review proposed changes, and provide ground truth perspective on whether new protocols are actually viable or just theoretical nonsense. Jessica straightened with pride. I won't let you down, Admiral. I know you won't. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent when Elena entered the base commanding officer's workspace, a larger, more formal office than the temporary space she'd been using. Captain Richard Morrison stood as she entered. A man in his mid-50s with silver hair and the kind of weathered competence that came from decades of service. "Admiral Voss, welcome." He gestured to a conference table where coffee had been set up. "I apologize for not greeting you personally when you arrived. I was briefed on your evaluation methodology and agreed to maintain distance until you were ready to reveal yourself. Thank you for your cooperation, Captain. It made the evaluation much more effective." Elena settled into a chair and accepted a cup of coffee. "I assume Commander Welch has already spoken with you?" Morrison's expression darkened slightly. "He has. And I want to apologize, Admiral. I should have addressed his leadership issues long before you arrived. I've been aware of concerns, but I didn't act decisively enough." "Why not?" The direct question caught Morrison off guard. He set down his coffee cup carefully. "Honestly? Because it was easier to manage around him than to confront him. He's politically connected, his fitness reports were adequate, and the path of least resistance was to keep him in place and work around his limitations." "And how did that work out for your command?" Morrison had the grace to look embarrassed. "Not as well as I'd convinced myself it did. Your evaluation makes that clear." Elena softened her tone slightly. "Captain, I'm not here to destroy careers or assign blame for past decisions. But I am here to ensure that future decisions are made with more courage and clarity. Commander Welch is a symptom of a larger problem, the tendency to tolerate mediocre leadership because confronting it is uncomfortable. That tendency ends now." "Yes, ma'am. What do you recommend?" "I've given Commander Welch an opportunity to improve through direct mentorship with Master Chief Torres. But that's contingent on you actively monitoring his progress and being willing to remove him if he doesn't demonstrate genuine change. Can you do that?" Morrison met her eyes. "Yes, ma'am. And I should have done it months ago." "Good. Because if you can't hold your executive officer accountable, I'll have to question whether you should remain in command." The statement was blunt, but Morrison nodded with what looked like relief. "Understood, Admiral. And for what it's worth, I appreciate the directness. I've been in the Navy long enough to know that honest feedback, even painful feedback, is the only kind worth receiving." They spent the next hour reviewing Elena's preliminary findings: areas of excellence, areas needing improvement, specific personnel who showed exceptional promise, and systemic issues that required command-level intervention. Morrison took notes, asked intelligent questions, and demonstrated the kind of engaged leadership that gave Elena hope for this command's future. As the meeting was concluding, there was a knock on the door. "Enter," Morrison called. Commander Welch stepped inside, and the change in his demeanor from that morning was remarkable. He'd spent the day with Master Chief Torres, and whatever Torres had put him through had clearly been humbling. His uniform was slightly rumpled, his face was flushed from physical exertion, and his eyes carried a combination of exhaustion and something that might have been emerging self-awareness. "Captain Morrison." "Admiral Voss. I apologize for interrupting. Master Chief Torres said I should report to you both at the end of the day." "Come in, Commander," Elena said. "How was your first leadership coaching session?" Welch took a deep breath. "Humbling, ma'am. Master Chief Torres had me spend the day shadowing junior enlisted personnel, watching how they actually work, listening to their concerns, understanding the impact my decisions have on their daily lives. He made me see how disconnected I've become from the people I'm supposed to be leading. And," Morrison prompted, "and I'm embarrassed, sir. I've been focused on my career, my authority, my position. I forgot that leadership isn't about being important, it's about making the people you lead more effective. Master Chief Torres showed me that in about 100 different ways today, most of them uncomfortable. Elena studied him carefully. The words sounded genuine, but words were easy. Action was what mattered. Commander, what specifically did you learn today that you're going to apply differently tomorrow? Welch didn't hesitate. That listening is more important than talking. That respect is earned through action, not demanded through rank. That every decision I make affects real people doing real work, and if I'm not considering their perspective, I'm making bad decisions. And that, he paused, clearly struggling with the admission. And that I've been a mediocre leader who's been coasting on his position instead of earning his place. Morrison and Elena exchanged glances. It was the right thing to say. But was it genuine transformation or just skilled self-preservation? Commander Welch, Elena said carefully, you're going to have opportunities in the coming days to demonstrate whether today's lessons have actually changed you or whether you're just saying what you think we want to hear. I strongly suggest you treat those opportunities as the career-defining moments they are. Yes, ma'am. I understand. Dismissed. After Welch left, Morrison leaned back in his chair. What do you think, Admiral? Real change or performance? Too early to tell. Elena replied honestly. But I'm cautiously optimistic. Sometimes people need to be broken down before they can be built back up better. Master Chief Torres is an expert at that process. If anyone can rehabilitate Commander Welch's leadership, it's him. And if he can't, then Commander Welch will be transferred to a position where his particular skills can be useful, and his particular flaws can't cause damage. But I'm going to give him a fair chance to prove he can change. Morrison nodded approvingly. That's generous, Admiral. It's practical, Captain. We invest too much in training our officers to throw them away without trying to salvage them first. But there's a limit to that patience, and Commander Welch is going to discover where that limit is if he doesn't demonstrate real improvement. As evening settled over the base, Elena found herself back on the training grounds, watching the sun paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of orange and gold. Personnel were securing equipment, finishing the day's work, moving through the rhythms of military life that she'd been part of for 3 decades. Master Chief Torres approached, carrying 2 bottles of water. He handed one to Elena without asking. Long day, Admiral. Long but productive, Master Chief. How was Commander Welch? Torres chuckled. Like watching someone's entire self-image collapse in real time. I had him shadow Petty Officer Chen, the same young man you talked to this morning, and watch how junior personnel actually work. I made him carry equipment, perform manual labor, experience what it's like when leadership makes decisions without considering ground truth reality. By hour 4, he was questioning every leadership decision he's made in the past 5 years. And do you think it took? Maybe. He's either genuinely humbled, or he's a better actor than I give him credit for. Time will tell. Torres took a drink of water. But I'll tell you this, he's scared. Actually scared that his career is on the line. And sometimes fear is the beginning of wisdom. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the sun descend toward the horizon. Master Chief, can I ask you something off the record? Always, ma'am. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? Giving Welch another chance? Part of me thinks I should just remove him and be done with it. Torres considered the question carefully. Admiral, I've served under a lot of flag officers in my 22 years. Most of them would have had Commander Welch transferred immediately, covered their asses with paperwork, and moved on. You didn't. You gave him a chance to be better. That tells me something important about your leadership. You actually care about developing people, not just managing them. But is it the right call? Won't know until we see how it plays out. But I'll tell you this. Every junior enlisted person on this base is watching how you handle this situation. They're seeing an admiral who holds people accountable but also gives them opportunities to improve. That's going to earn you more loyalty than any number of speeches or formal inspections. Elena smiled slightly. You're a wise man, Master Chief. I'm old, ma'am. There's a difference. He gestured toward the operations center. You've got a message waiting, by the way. From SOCOM. Admiral Hawthorne wants an update on your evaluation. Of course he does. He's probably getting calls from half the Pentagon asking why there's an admiral running around Coronado pretending to be a contractor. Probably. But for what it's worth, everyone here is glad you did it that way. You saw who we really are. That matters. After Torres left, Elena stood alone on the training grounds as the last light faded from the sky. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new evaluations, new opportunities to shape this command into something exceptional. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She'd revealed herself. She'd held leadership accountable. She'd inspired junior personnel and challenged senior officers. And most importantly, she'd demonstrated that rank without character was meaningless. But rank with purpose could transform an entire command. The sound of boots on asphalt made her turn. A formation of SEALs was returning from evening training, their faces tired but satisfied. As they passed, the team leader called out, "Detail, attention." The entire formation snapped to attention and saluted in perfect unison. Elena returned the salute, and for just a moment, she saw in their faces what she'd been searching for. Not fear of authority, not resentment of change, but genuine respect earned through competence and character. This was why she did this work. This was what made it all worthwhile. 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Elena conducted formal interviews with every officer and senior enlisted leader on the base. She observed training exercises, reviewed operational procedures, examined resource allocation, and dug into every aspect of how Naval Amphibious Base Coronado actually functioned versus how it was supposed to function. What she found was both encouraging and concerning. The personnel were exceptional, dedicated, skilled, innovative. The training protocols were solid, well-designed, and mostly well-executed. But there were systemic issues that had been allowed to persist simply because that's how we've always done it. She documented everything. Every inefficiency, every gap, every opportunity for improvement. And she drafted recommendations that would transform not just this command, but eventually the entire Special Operations training apparatus. On a Thursday morning, she called a command-wide meeting in the base auditorium. Every person stationed at Coronado who could be spared from critical duties was present. Over 800 personnel packed into rows of seats. The energy in the room, a mixture of curiosity and nervous anticipation. Elena walked to the podium in her service uniform, the 2 stars on her collar catching the stage lights. Master Chief Torres stood at attention near the front row. Captain Morrison sat with his senior staff. Marcus, Jessica, and Ramos occupied seats in the 3rd row, their expressions attentive. And Commander Welch sat near the back, his posture humble, his face showing the wear of 2 weeks under Master Chief Torres's unrelenting mentorship. "Good morning," Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the audio system. 2 weeks ago, I revealed my identity to this command. Since then, I've conducted the most comprehensive evaluation of my career, meeting with over 200 personnel, observing more than 50 training evolutions, and reviewing every operational procedure this command employs. She clicked a remote, and the screen behind her lit up with the SOCOM seal. I was sent here to determine whether Naval Amphibious Base Coronado is capable of serving as the model command for next-generation special operations training. Whether you have the leadership, the protocols, and the culture necessary to set the standard that other commands will follow. The tension in the auditorium was palpable. This was the moment when all the evaluation, All the observation, all the uncertainty would resolve into concrete conclusions. I'm pleased to report, Elena continued, that you've exceeded expectations. This command demonstrates exactly the kind of excellence, adaptability, and professionalism that we need to scale across the entire special warfare community. The relief was audible, a collective exhale that rippled through the packed auditorium. But Elena raised a hand before anyone could relax too much. However, excellence doesn't mean perfection. I've identified 17 specific areas where improvement is needed, ranging from minor, procedural adjustments to significant cultural changes. Over the next 6 months, you're going to implement these changes under my direct supervision. Some will be easy, some will be hard. All of them are necessary. She clicked through slides, showing various statistics, comparison charts, and recommendation summaries. Her presentation was crisp, professional, and backed by data that couldn't be argued with. First, training protocols. You're going to adopt new maritime interdiction procedures that emphasize tactical flexibility over rigid plan adherence. Commander Kane and his team have already been briefed on these changes and will be piloting the new approach starting next month. Marcus nodded from his seat, clearly already aware of this development. Second, leadership development. We're implementing a comprehensive mentorship program where every junior enlisted person will be paired with a senior mentor who will actively guide their career development. Petty Officer Chen has been working with Master Chief Torres to design this program, and it's going to revolutionize how we develop future leaders. Elena spotted Chen in the audience, his face glowing with pride at the public recognition. Third, operational efficiency. We're streamlining communication protocols, restructuring resource allocation, and eliminating redundant administrative requirements that waste time without adding value. Captain Morrison has already approved these changes, and they'll be implemented within 30 days. She continued through the list: equipment upgrades, training schedule adjustments, enhanced safety protocols, improved integration between SEAL teams and support personnel. Each recommendation was specific, practical, and backed by the detailed evaluation she'd conducted. Finally, Elena said, her tone becoming more serious, "We're addressing leadership accountability. This command will no longer tolerate mediocre leadership at any level. Officers and enlisted leaders will be evaluated not just on mission completion, but on how they develop their personnel, how they create positive culture, and how they demonstrate the kind of character that earns genuine respect." Her eyes swept across the auditorium, landing briefly on Commander Welch before moving on. "Some of you are going to discover that your leadership style needs adjustment. Master Chief Torres is going to be leading leadership development workshops for all officers and senior enlisted, and attendance is mandatory. This isn't optional professional development, it's a command requirement." She clicked to the final slide, which showed a simple statement: "Excellence is a habit, not an event." "This command is already good," Elena concluded. "My job over the next 6 months is to help you become exceptional, to create a culture where excellence isn't just expected but demanded, where mediocrity is challenged and greatness is celebrated, where every person, regardless of rank or position, understands that they're part of something larger than themselves, a tradition of service, sacrifice, and professional excellence that defines American special operations." The auditorium was silent, every person processing the magnitude of what was being proposed. This wasn't just a few policy changes, this was a fundamental transformation of how the command operated. "I know some of you are thinking this sounds like a lot of work," Elena said with a slight smile. "You're right. It is. But you're Navy SEALs. You're support personnel for the most elite operators in the world. You don't shy away from hard work, you embrace it. And I promise you this: 6 months from now, When other commands are looking at you as the model to emulate. When your training protocols are being adopted fleet-wide. When your careers are advancing. Because you were part of something transformational. You're going to look back on this moment and be proud that you were here when it happened. She straightened to attention. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your dedication. And thank you for proving that excellence is possible when leadership demands it and personnel deliver it. Retries continue. Questions? For a moment, no one moved. Then, a hand rose from the middle section, a young ensign, barely old enough to buy a beer, but with the courage to speak up in front of 800 people and a 2-star admiral. Yes, Ensign? Hartley, ma'am. Ensign James Hartley. He stood, his voice steady despite obvious nerves. Admiral, these changes sound exceptional, but they're also going to require a lot of additional work on top of our already demanding schedules. How do we balance implementing new protocols while maintaining our current operational tempo? It was a smart question, practical, not challenging, but getting at a real concern that probably every person in the auditorium shared. Excellent question, Ensign Hartley. The short answer is, you don't do it alone, and you don't do it all at once. Elena clicked to a new slide, showing a phased implementation timeline. These changes will roll out over 6 months in carefully planned phases. Some changes, like the communication protocol updates, will actually reduce your workload by eliminating redundancy. Other changes, like the mentorship program, will require time investment up front, but will pay dividends in leadership development. And some changes will be piloted by specific teams before being scaled command-wide, which means we'll work out the bugs before asking everyone to adopt them. She paused. But I'm not going to lie to you, this will require effort. Excellence always does. The question is whether you believe that effort is worth the result. Based on what I've seen over the past 2 weeks, I believe you do. But you'll have to prove me right. Another hand rose. Chief Petty Officer Sarah Rodriguez, a logistics specialist Elena had interviewed the previous week. Admiral, you mentioned leadership accountability. Does that apply equally to officer and enlisted leadership, or are different standards going to apply? Elena smiled, recognizing the subtext of the question. Chief Rodriguez is diplomatically asking whether officers are going to be held to the same standards as enlisted personnel. The answer is yes, absolutely. Unequivocally yes. In fact, I'd argue that officers should be held to higher standards because leadership responsibility increases with rank. If anything, the scrutiny will be more intense at higher levels. She let that statement settle before continuing. Master Chief Torres will be conducting leadership assessments across the entire command structure. His evaluations will carry significant weight in fitness reports, promotion recommendations, and assignment decisions. And before anyone asks, yes, that includes me. I've asked Master Chief Torres to provide me with honest feedback on my own leadership during this evaluation period, because I believe in the standard I'm setting for everyone else. The murmur that ran through the auditorium suggested that this revelation had surprised many people. Admirals didn't typically submit themselves to evaluation by senior enlisted personnel, at least not publicly. Torres stood from his seat. Admiral, permission to speak? Granted, Master Chief. Ma'am, I just want to confirm for everyone here that you've given me carte blanche to evaluate your leadership with the same honesty and directness I'm applying to everyone else. And I want everyone to know that the Admiral has already incorporated feedback I provided last week about her communication style during crisis situations. She practices what she preaches. People. That's leadership. The statement earned Elena more credibility than any number of formal presentations could have achieved. Torres had just publicly validated that she walked the walk, not just talked the talk. More questions came about specific training protocols, about timeline for implementations, about how success would be measured. Elena answered each one with the same combination of directness and detailed knowledge that had characterized her entire evaluation. She didn't dodge difficult questions or hide behind rank. She engaged honestly, admitted when she didn't have all the answers yet, and demonstrated that she valued input from personnel at every level. After 45 minutes of questions, Elena brought the meeting to a close. Thank you all for your engagement and your questions. My door is open literally. If you have concerns, ideas, or feedback, bring them to me directly. I'd rather deal with issues when they're small than let them grow into problems. Dismissed. The auditorium erupted into noise as personnel stood and began filing out, their conversations animated. Elena remained at the podium, watching the flow of humanity, noting who was engaged and energized versus who looked uncertain or resistant. Captain Morrison approached the stage. Admiral, that was masterfully done. You gave them a vision worth working toward, and the practical roadmap to get there. I'm impressed. Thank you, Captain. But the real work starts now. Presentations are easy. Implementation is hard. Marcus, Jessica, and Ramos made their way through the crowd to the stage. Marcus saluted, then grinned. Ma'am, you just made us the most scrutinized SEAL team in the Navy by announcing we're piloting new protocols. We're going to be under a microscope. Yes, you are. Problem? No, ma'am. Just acknowledging reality. My team is ready. I know they are. That's why I selected you. Elena gestured for them to follow her off the stage toward a side corridor where they could speak more privately. I need to brief you three on something that's classified and doesn't leave this conversation. The three officers exchanged glances, their postures shifting to alert attention. SOCOM is watching this evaluation very carefully, Elena continued once they were away from the crowd. Not just to assess training protocols, but to assess whether I'm the right person to command an SW. This is essentially my probationary period at flag rank. If this transformation succeeds, my position is secure, and I'll have the credibility to make changes across the entire special operations community. If it fails, it won't fail, Jessica said immediately. We won't let it. I appreciate your confidence, Lieutenant, but you need to understand the stakes. Every decision I make here, every recommendation I implement, every leadership issue I address, all of it is being evaluated by people with more stars than I have. The pressure is significant. Ramos crossed his arms. Admiral, with all due respect, you just spent 2 weeks observing us while pretending to be a civilian. You handled an emergency that could have turned into a disaster. You faced down a toxic XO and gave him a chance to improve instead of just crushing him. And you just delivered a presentation that has this entire command energized about change instead of resistant to it. If SOCOM can't see that you're exactly the leader we need, then SOCOM has bigger problems than training protocols. Elena felt a warmth spread through her chest. The kind of loyalty that couldn't be ordered or demanded, only earned. Thank you, Chief. But the reality is that success here requires all of us working together. I can't do this alone. You're not alone, ma'am, Marcus said firmly. You've got this entire command behind you. We've been waiting for someone like you, someone who actually understands what we do, who's willing to challenge the status quo, who cares more about results than politics. We're not going to let you fail because we're not going to let ourselves fail. Commander Kane is right, Jessica added. You've set a standard, Admiral. Now we get to prove we can meet it. That's not pressure, that's opportunity. Elena studied their faces, determined, loyal, confident. This was what good leadership created. Not followers, but partners. Not subordinates, but allies who shared the mission and the burden of excellence. All right, she said. Then, let's get to work. Marcus, I need your team ready to pilot the new maritime interdiction protocols within 2 weeks. Jessica, you're going to be my liaison for all training evolution observations. I want your ground truth assessment of what works and what doesn't. Ramos, you're going to work with Master Chief Torres on the Enlisted Leadership Development Program. Questions? No, ma'am. They responded in unison. Good. Dismissed. As they walked away, Elena heard Ramos say to the others, I told you she was the real deal. Worth the weird 2 days of not knowing who the hell she was. Marcus's response drifted back. Yeah, but you were also the one who bet she was CIA. You were completely wrong. Details, sir. I got the important part right, she's a badass. Elena smiled to herself and headed back toward her office. The real work was just beginning. But for the first time in months, she felt the kind of energized optimism that came from being exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. 3 months later, the changes were undeniable. The new maritime interdiction protocols had been tested, refined, and adopted not just by Marcus's team but by 3 other SEAL teams at different bases. Response times had improved by 18%. Mission success rates in training scenarios had increased by 12%. And most importantly, the teams reported higher confidence and better adaptability when plans went sideways. The Leadership Development Program had transformed the command culture. Junior enlisted personnel were being mentored by senior leaders who actually cared about their advancement. Officer evaluations now included detailed assessments of leadership character, not just mission completion. And toxic behaviors that had been tolerated for years were being identified and corrected before they could poison entire units. Commander Welch had surprised everyone, possibly including himself. 3 months under Master Chief Torres's intensive mentorship had produced genuine transformation. He would never be a charismatic leader, but he'd become a competent one. More importantly, he'd become humble. He listened more than he talked now. He asked for input instead of demanding compliance. And the personnel who had once dreaded working under him now spoke of him with cautious respect. It's like watching someone learn to be human, Torres had reported during one of his weekly briefings with Elena. He's awkward about it. Tries too hard sometimes. But the effort is genuine. He's never going to be a natural leader, but he's become an adequate one. That's a victory. Elena had agreed. Not every story ended with dramatic transformation. Sometimes the victory was simply preventing further damage and creating space for someone to become slightly better than they were. On a Thursday afternoon in early February, Elena stood in the operations center reviewing the final report she would submit to SOCOM. The document was comprehensive, over 200 pages of analysis, recommendations, and implementation results. It represented 3 months of intensive work, countless hours of observation and assessment, and the collective effort of an entire command pushing itself toward excellence. Master Chief Torres approached with his usual quiet competence. Admiral, you've got visitors. VIPs from SOCOM. Admiral Hawthorne just arrived with his staff. Elena felt her pulse quicken slightly. This was it, the final evaluation of her evaluation. Hawthorne was her direct superior, the person who would determine whether her command of NSW would continue, or whether this had been a brief experimental assignment. Where are they? Conference room. Captain Morrison is entertaining them. But they asked for you, specifically. Elena straightened her uniform, took a deep breath, and headed toward the conference room. Whatever came next, she'd done the work. She'd delivered results. She'd transformed a good command into an exceptional one. The rest was outside her control. Admiral Richard Hawthorne stood as she entered, a man in his early 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. His uniform displayed 3 stars and enough ribbons to tell a story of 4 decades of distinguished service. "Admiral Voss, good to see you." He extended his hand, and Elena shook it firmly. "Admiral Hawthorne, welcome to Coronado. I wasn't expecting you until next week. Change of plans. I wanted to see the results of your evaluation firsthand before reviewing the paperwork." He gestured to the chairs around the conference table. "Captain Morrison has been giving me the highlights, but I want to hear your assessment directly. How did it go?" Elena settled into her chair, her mind rapidly organizing 3 months of work into a coherent summary. "It went better than expected, sir. This command demonstrated exceptional baseline competence and genuine desire to improve. The changes we've implemented have produced measurable improvements in training effectiveness, leadership quality, and operational readiness. More importantly, we've created a culture that values continuous improvement over comfortable mediocrity." Specific results? Training success rates increased by 12% across all SEAL teams. Response times improved by 18%. Leadership satisfaction scores from junior enlisted personnel increased by 34%. Equipment utilization efficiency improved by 21% through better resource allocation. And we've identified and are developing 17 junior personnel who show exceptional leadership potential for accelerated advancement. Hawthorne's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's impressive. How much of that improvement comes from the Hawthorne effect, people performing better because they know they're being watched?" It was a fair question, and Elena appreciated that he was pushing her. "Some, certainly. We've accounted for that by comparing performance metrics from months 2 and 3 after the initial novelty wore off. The improvements have sustained and in some cases increased, which suggests cultural change rather than temporary performance boost." "And the leadership issues?" "Morrison mentioned you addressed some significant problems with his executive officer. Commander Welch demonstrated leadership behaviors that were undermining command effectiveness. I gave him an opportunity to improve through intensive mentorship with Master Chief Torres. He's responded well, not dramatically, but genuinely. He'll never be an exceptional leader, but he's no longer a toxic one. That's an acceptable outcome." Hawthorne leaned back in his chair, studying her with those penetrating eyes. "You could have just had him removed. Would have been easier, cleaner, less risky." "Yes, sir. But easier isn't always better. We invest significant resources in developing our officers. When possible, I prefer rehabilitation over removal. And when it's not possible, then I remove them without hesitation. Leadership is too important to compromise on." Hawthorne smiled slightly. "Good answer." He pulled out a tablet and scrolled through what appeared to be her evaluation report. "I've been reading your recommendations for scaling these protocols to other commands. Ambitious. Also expensive and politically complicated." "Yes, sir. But necessary. We can't keep training people for yesterday's wars and expecting them to win tomorrow's." "Agreed." He set down the tablet. "Admiral Voss, I'm going to be direct. When I approved your assignment to NSW Command, there were significant voices in the Pentagon arguing that you weren't ready for flag rank in such a critical position. Too much operational focus, not enough political finesse. Too willing to challenge sacred cows. Too direct in your communication style." Elena felt her stomach tighten, but kept her expression neutral. "Yes, sir. I'm aware of those concerns. I'm telling you this because those same voices are now arguing that your evaluation here proves them right. That your approach is too disruptive, too demanding, too likely to create friction with traditional commands." The room felt suddenly smaller. This was at the moment when 3 months of work might be dismissed because she'd been too effective, too willing to challenge mediocrity. "However," Hawthorne continued, and Elena caught the slight smile playing at his lips. There's another group of voices, including mine, who argue that disruptive is exactly what we need. That demanding is appropriate when the stakes are life and death. That creating friction with traditional commands is necessary when those commands have become comfortable with inadequacy. He stood, and Elena and Morrison immediately rose with him. Admiral Voss, your evaluation here has exceeded my expectations. Your methodologies were unorthodox but effective. Your recommendations are sound and backed by solid data. And most importantly, you've demonstrated the kind of leadership that inspires excellence rather than demanding compliance. Elena felt hope rising in her chest but kept it carefully controlled. Thank you, sir. Effective immediately. Your assignment as Commander of Naval Special Warfare Command is made permanent. Additionally, you're authorized to scale your training protocol recommendations across all NSW commands. You'll have a budget, a staff, and my full support to make it happen. You're also being assigned 3 additional commands for similar evaluations over the next 18 months. The relief and excitement hit simultaneously. Elena kept her expression professional, but felt Torres's grin from across the room. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Because if you do, those Pentagon voices will have my job along with yours. Hawthorne's expression became more serious. This is the most significant overhaul of SEAL training protocols in 20 years, Elena. You're going to face resistance. Some of it will be professional disagreement, which is fine. Some will be political pushback from people who resent change, which is annoying but manageable. And some will be personal attacks on your competence, your leadership style, and your right to hold this position. That part will be ugly. I can handle ugly, sir. I believe you can. Just remember, you're not alone. You've got a command full of people who believe in what you're doing. Use them. Trust them. And don't let the bastards wear you down. After Hawthorne and his staff departed, Elena found herself standing in the operations center, staring at the tactical displays without really seeing them. 3 months of work had just been validated. 3 months of risk had just paid off. 3 months of pushing herself and everyone around her toward excellence had just been recognized as exactly what the Navy needed. Master Chief Torres approached, offering a bottle of water. Congratulations, Admiral. Well deserved. Thank you, Master Chief. Though this feels less like an ending and more like a beginning. That's because it is. You just got permission to shake up the entire special warfare community. That's going to make a lot of people very happy and a lot of other people very angry. I can live with that. Marcus, Jessica, and Ramos entered the operations center together, clearly having heard the news through the informal communication network that operated faster than official channels. They approached with grins on their faces. Admiral, we heard, Marcus said. Permanent command and expansion authority. That's exceptional. It's an opportunity. Elena corrected. What we make of it depends on continued hard work from everyone in this command. The ones we'll be evaluating next. Where are you sending us next? Jessica asked. Who said I'm sending you anywhere? Ma'am. With respect, you're going to need people you trust to help evaluate other commands. People who understand your methodology and can apply it consistently. We're volunteering. Elena looked at the 3 of them, loyal, competent, genuinely committed to the mission. You understand this will mean additional responsibilities on top of your current duties? That you'll be scrutinized even more intensely than you already are? That some people will resent you for being part of this transformation? Yes, ma'am, Ramos replied. And we're still volunteering. This matters. You've shown us what excellence actually looks like. We want to help spread that across the entire community. All right, Elena said. Then you're officially assigned to my evaluation team. We'll meet tomorrow to discuss the next command on our list and how we're going to approach it. B. Prepared it's going to be harder than here because we won't have the element of surprise. We'll figure it out, ma'am, Marcus said confidently. As they left, Elena felt a profound sense of satisfaction mixed with anticipatory excitement. This was just the beginning. 3 months ago, she'd arrived at Coronado as an unknown quantity, pretending to be a civilian contractor. Now she was leaving as the validated commander of naval special warfare with authorization to transform the entire community. The journey from dismissed contractor to respected admiral had been deliberate, challenging, and ultimately successful. She'd proven that rank without character was meaningless, but character with rank could change everything. 6 months later, Elena stood on the same training grounds where she'd first revealed her identity. But this time, the crowd was different. Representatives from 8 different SEAL commands had gathered for the formal adoption ceremony of the new training protocols that had been tested, refined, and validated over the past 9 months. Commander Welch stood among the officers, his posture confident but humble. He'd completed Master Chief Torres's leadership program and had recently received his first positive fitness report in 3 years. He would never be a star, but he'd become competent and, more importantly, he'd become someone junior personnel could respect. Petty Officer Chen, now Petty Officer First Class Chen, following an accelerated advancement, stood with the enlisted formation. He'd been accepted into the Chief Petty Officer Selection Program a full year ahead of schedule, a direct result of his work on the Leadership Development Program and his demonstrated potential. Marcus Kane stood at the front with his SEAL team, now officially designated as the model training unit that other commands would emulate. He'd been selected for early promotion to commander and was being considered for leadership positions that would shape the future of special operations. Jessica Park had been assigned as the primary instructor for the new maritime interdiction protocols and was traveling to different commands teaching the methodologies Elena had developed. And Master Chief Torres stood beside Elena, his weathered face showing satisfaction at seeing months of hard work come to fruition. Admiral Hawthorne stepped to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, what we're witnessing today is more than just the adoption of new training protocols. We're witnessing a cultural transformation in how the Navy develops and prepares our special operations personnel. This transformation began with one admiral who had the courage to challenge conventional wisdom and the competence to back up that challenge with results. He gestured to Elena. Admiral Voss didn't arrive at Coronado with fanfare or authority displays. She arrived quietly, observed carefully, and assessed honestly. She saw excellence and elevated it. She saw mediocrity and corrected it. She saw potential and developed it. And in doing so, she's created a model that will influence SEAL training for the next generation. Elena felt the weight of expectation, the responsibility of leadership, the burden of excellence. But she also felt something else, the satisfaction of knowing she'd made a difference. The pride of seeing talented people grow. The joy of watching a command transform from good to exceptional. Admiral Voss, Hawthorne said, "You have the floor." Elena approached the podium, looking out over hundreds of faces, some she knew, many she didn't. All of them united in service and sacrifice. "I'm going to tell you something that might surprise you," she began. "The changes we've implemented over the past 9 months aren't revolutionary. They're not complex or mysterious. They're simply the result of applying one fundamental principle. Treat people like they matter, hold them to high standards, and give them the tools to succeed." She paused, letting that sink in. Every recommendation in our new training protocols comes from operators who did the work, from senior enlisted personnel who mentored junior sailors, from leaders who cared more about mission success than personal glory. I didn't create this transformation. I just created the space for talented people to show what they could do when mediocrity was no longer acceptable. Her eyes found Marcus, Jessica, Ramos, Torres, Chen, even Welch. These people created this transformation. They proved that excellence is possible when leadership demands it and personnel deliver it. My job was simply to recognize their potential and remove the obstacles preventing them from achieving it. She straightened, her voice taking on the formal tone of command. To all the commands represented here today, you're about to embark on a similar journey. It won't be easy. Change never is. You'll face resistance, skepticism, and doubt. But you'll also discover, as we did at Coronado, that your personnel are capable of far more than you imagined when you give them clear standards, proper support, and genuine leadership. Elena looked directly at the SEAL teams assembled before her. You are the tip of the spear for American Special Operations. You operate in the darkest places, facing the hardest challenges, carrying the heaviest burdens. You deserve training that prepares you for that reality. You deserve leadership that understands what you face. And you deserve a military that values your service enough to continuously improve how we prepare you for the mission. She came to attention. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. And thank you for proving that excellence isn't just possible, it's achievable when we have the courage to demand it. Stay strong. Stay ready. Stay excellent. The formation erupted into applause, not the polite courtesy clapping that usually followed speeches, but genuine, enthusiastic recognition. And then, like a wave spreading across the assembled personnel, they came to attention and saluted in perfect unison. Hundreds of hands raised, hundreds of voices silent, hundreds of professionals acknowledging that what they'd witnessed over the past 9 months wasn't just policy change, it was a fundamental shift in how leadership could and should operate. Elena returned the salute, holding it for a long moment, honoring the trust and respect that had been earned through action rather than demanded through rank. As the formation broke and personnel began moving toward the reception area, Master Chief Torres approached. That was one hell of a journey, Admiral. It's not over, Master Chief. This is just the beginning. I know, but take a moment to appreciate what you've accomplished. You arrived as a stranger pretending to be nobody important. You're leaving as a leader who changed how the entire special warfare community thinks about training and excellence. That's legacy-level impact. Elena smiled. We'll see, Master Chief. Legacy is determined by what lasts, not by what starts. Let's see if these changes survive the test of time. They will, Torres said with confidence. Because they're built on a foundation of competence, character, and genuine care for the people doing the work. That kind of foundation doesn't crumble. As the California sun descended toward the Pacific, Elena stood on the training grounds and allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. From dismissed contractor to transformational leader, from anonymous observer to permanent commander, from skeptical evaluation to validated excellence. The journey had been unconventional, sometimes uncomfortable, often challenging, but it had been worth it. Because somewhere in the future, a SEAL team would execute a mission more effectively because of training they received. A junior enlisted sailor would advance faster because of mentorship they were given. A leader would make better decisions because of standards that were ominous, enforced. And lives would be saved because excellence had been demanded, achieved, and sustained. That was the ultimate salute, not the formal gesture of military protocol, but the living legacy of leadership done right. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more military and veteran stories. These true tales keep the courage alive for generations to come. And in the comments, tell us where are you watching from, and who's the quiet leader you'll never forget.